Chapter 1445. The end of the 7th trip meant that, "Where are we going, Dad?" was coming to the end. Although the 6th trip was still being broadcasted on TV, for the 5 fathers and 5 children, the next trip would be the last time they would travel together. Even if they had the chance to gather together in the future, it would be difficult for them to travel together again. There wouldn't be so many carefully planned games, and they wouldn't have such happy and carefree smiles. The carefree children didn't feel anything, and Poplar Fruit didn't mention it. However, when they left, a faint sadness filled their hearts. On the plane, Poplar Fruit looked at Kiki, who was sleeping soundly. He touched her hair, and decided not to tell her so early. He wanted her to enjoy the last trip happily. When he got home, Poplar Fruit was busy with work again. It was worth mentioning that after he got home, Poplar Fruit got his wish of being an associate professor. The academic circle was very small, and the linguistic circle was even smaller. Many experts and scholars who had a good relationship with Poplar Fruit, such as professors from Beijing University of Foreign Studies and Beijing University, sent him congratulatory messages. Even though Yang Guo was young, putting aside her qualifications, Yang Guo's academic achievements were enough to make many of her peers look up to her. Take the thesis that was still serialized in the country's most authoritative linguistic journal as an example. This thesis was even praised as the highest achievement in the linguistic field in the past 50 years. Poplar Fruit had almost single-handedly broken the barrier between Chinese and English, opening a new world of cultural exchange for everyone. Of course, it wasn't obvious yet, but there were radical scholars who couldn't wait to claim that Poplar Fruit's thesis had created an economic value of 4 trillion. This was a bit exaggerated, but it was true that if the key to reducing the barrier between Chinese and English was grasped by more people, it would definitely promote the rapid development of countless publishing houses, film, music, and other cultural companies. These prophecies could definitely be seen within 5 years. It was said that many media giants had already organized teams to research Poplar Fruit's thesis. Language majors were in short supply in the market. However, the $4 trillion market had nothing to do with Poplar Fruit. Such a linguistic discovery could not be patented. No media company would be willing to share their profits with Poplar Fruit. But Poplar Fruit didn't care, because he was happy to see the translation market prosper, and also happy to see the glory of Chinese culture gradually show in the world. In this world, there shouldn't only be Korean culture and the dregs of Nihongo. I'm exaggerating, don't blame me running rampant. There should also be a place for Chinese culture. Of course, Poplar Fruit had a chance to get a share of the pie. Although he didn't have a share of the shares of New Translation Road, Zheng Yujie wouldn't mistreat the founder of New Translation Road. In the past 3 years, New Translation Road had accumulated a lot of excellent literary translations. In the next few years, as long as Zheng Yujie didn't make any stupid decisions, New Translation Road would definitely become the leader of the publishing industry. But these were all things that would happen in the future, so there was no need to go into detail here. For now, this thesis had established Poplar Fruit's position in the domestic and global language field. Even if he wasn't the top few people, he was at least the backbone of the first echelon. The reason why even professors from outside Beijing and Beijing University wanted to be on good terms with Poplar Fruit was that everyone believed that regardless of whether the old stubbornness would match Poplar Fruit's position, the future of Chinese linguistics and translation would definitely be the world of excellent young scholars like Poplar Fruit. This thesis had a lot of impact. Just as Chen Zongdai expected, Poplar Fruit would also be promoted to full professor next year. From associate professor to full professor, many people couldn't cross the hurdle even after more than 10 years. This was not only because of ability, but also because of the strength of the institution and connections. This was the darkness of Chinese academia. There was no other way. Therefore, Poplar Fruit's ease was bound to arouse the jealousy of some people. They didn't care why Poplar Fruit was successful. They just felt that there was a conspiracy behind it. This was the so-called don't worry about scarcity, but worry about inequality. But they also didn't think about the reason why Poplar Fruit was so successful today. It was true that Yang Guo had received Chen Zongdai's support from the start of her postgraduate studies. She had received the resources of the school, and even the school. This was one of the reasons why Yang Guo could achieve so much today. But Poplar Fruit was born poor, and he wasn't a powerful person. Logically speaking, this big pie would fall on anyone's head, but not him. But Poplar Fruit relied on his own ability and hard work to carve out a bloody path in a difficult situation. If Poplar Fruit hadn't shown a genius talent in linguistics, with his status, would Chen Zhongdai have personally met Poplar Fruit and guided Poplar Fruit's studies? If Poplar Fruit hadn't been able to translate so many classic works, including pushing 2 literary masters to the altar of the Nobel Prize, with his background, would the school have been willing to give him so many resources? If Poplar Fruit hadn't been able to stand out in the field of linguistics and publish several papers that could cause an earthquake, with his qualifications, would the academic community have praised him as a star of tomorrow? The saying that not everyone could succeed so easily was true, because sometimes in life, there were a lot of factors outside of fair competition. But those who could reach the peak of excellence were definitely able to crush those unfair people with their own ability and hard work. However, after saying so much, Poplar Fruit himself didn't care about the rumors in the outside world. He still lived his life peacefully, working hard between school and family. Feng Beibei was in her first year of graduate school this year, and she was even busier than Poplar Fruit. All day long, she was thinking about some mathematical models and studying differential geometry on the same trajectory as Qiu Chengtong. Now, Poplar Fruit couldn't understand the articles on her computer at all. However, Feng Beibei was still very normal at home. She intimately hugged Poplar Fruit's neck and said that it was because she had a family that she didn't become a crazy researcher. But no matter how busy Feng Beibei was, she still needed to take a few days off. Poplar Fruit had helped her apply for leave from her supervisor. This was because in the next week, they were going to a beautiful seaside city in Australia for a vacation. Chapter 1446. It was the weekend. Poplar Fruit happened to have no classes, so he went to New Translation Road to visit Zheng Yujie, who did not seem to be in a good mood when she called recently. Zheng Yujie, who had experienced a commercial acquisition war, seemed to have matured during this period of time. She learned a lot of experience and skills in running a big company from her aunt. She used the funds she raised from her aunt, as well as the funds she transferred from Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit also had a very high remuneration and dividends from Wanhe and Tianyi, and from some of her other businesses to carry out a series of financing and additional issuance operations. She successfully reduced the shares of Tungsun Literature, which had threatened her, to less than 20%. However, Zheng Yujie did not eliminate Tungsun Literature. That was because the two sides had not reached a life-and-death situation. Zheng Yujie also understood that she needed Tungsun Literature, the largest provider of online literature, to become the best ammunition depot for her overseas expansion plan. Tungsun Literature was in charge of internal affairs while New Translation Road was in charge of external affairs. If the two sides became mortal enemies, both sides would only suffer. If the two sides cooperated sincerely and became each other's allies, then they could maintain this advantage for a long time. Of course, Zheng Yujie was not afraid that the other party would change their minds. That was because she had secretly increased the shares of Tungsun Literature through her aunt's strength. If it was liquidated, her shares would exceed 20%. If she wanted, she could enter the shareholders' meeting of Tungsun Literature at any time. This kind of growth was especially precious for the leader of a big company like Zheng Yujie. However, what he felt the most for Poplar Fruit was that Zheng Yujie seemed to be less dependent on him. Zheng Yujie used to call him every 2 to 3 days in the past. Even if Poplar Fruit did not have anything new to talk about, she would talk to Poplar Fruit about a lot of trivial things or complain about her recent work experiences. This habit had lasted for 4 years. Feng Beibei also knew about this. But ever since she had a big fight with Poplar Fruit, she didn't dwell on this issue anymore. Perhaps this was Feng Beibei's great wisdom. She understood that instead of forcing Poplar Fruit to make a choice against his will, it was better to let Poplar Fruit, who would never hurt her, handle this relationship by himself. At the very least, with Poplar Fruit's personality, the outcome would not be too bad. Poplar Fruit also knew this, but perhaps it was because of the guilt towards Zheng Yujie that he hid in his heart. Poplar Fruit would not ignore Zheng Yujie's call, nor would he not listen to her. Until the last 2 weeks, Zheng Yujie's calls had decreased. Poplar Fruit didn't feel relaxed. Instead, he felt a little uncomfortable. Perhaps men were such cheekbones. They ate from the bowl and looked at the pot. Even if they had the heart of Lu Xiaohui, they couldn't help but be easily moved like Wei Xiaobao. When Zheng Yujie stopped looking for him, Poplar Fruit was a little disappointed. Although this disappointment was still within a controllable range, Poplar Fruit laughed at himself and let go of his heart. Zheng Yujie was a good girl, but he was destined to only be able to pass by her in this life. Why should he be entangled with her and not let her find her own happiness? This was also unfair to his wife. As for why he wanted to visit Zheng Yujie, it really wasn't because Poplar Fruit was moved, but because Zheng Yujie's assistant, who had been with her for many years but never grew up, secretly called Poplar Fruit. She said that Zheng Yujie had recently been working without caring about her health, and sometimes she would secretly wipe her tears in the office. Well, even if it wasn't an ambiguous relationship like the assistant thought, from the perspective of friendship, Poplar Fruit should still visit Zheng Yujie. But when Poplar Fruit came to Zheng Yujie's office, she was acting as usual. Instead, when she saw Poplar Fruit, she calmly said, "You're here. Just in time. I also have something to talk to you about." Zheng Yujie took out a document from the drawer with a lock, handed it to Poplar Fruit, and said, "Sign it." She still spoke and did things in the same tone as before. She was in a rush and meant what she said, but not very overbearing. But Poplar Fruit had a feeling that there was a bit of a gap between himself and Zheng Yujie. It wasn't very deep, but he was inexplicably a little flustered, as if this gap could never be filled up. In silence, Poplar Fruit opened the document and slowly read it, but Poplar Fruit himself didn't know what he was looking at. It was very strange, as if he had suddenly lost the ability to read. This document was only a few pages, but Poplar Fruit read it for half an hour. Then his mind went blank, and he couldn't remember what he was looking at. Looking up, he suddenly saw that Zheng Yujie's face was already unknowingly full of tears. That pretty face, after being washed away by tears and foundation, could no longer hide her haggard and sad face. What was going on? Poplar Fruit was shocked. He opened the document again and roughly scanned it. Poplar Fruit was not unfamiliar with it. It was a share transfer letter that he had seen before. The transfer was still the shares of Nui Lu, still 20%, but this time, it was Zheng Yujie who transferred it to him. If Poplar Fruit signed it, then the transfer of the shares would take effect. The shares that seemed to be returned by Zheng Yujie would still remain in Poplar Fruit's name. However, the 20% in the past and the 20% now were two completely different things. 2 months ago, this 20% was worth 400 million. Now, because of financing and additional issues, this 20% was as high as 600 million. But Poplar Fruit didn't care about the amount of money, because perhaps only he would understand the emotional significance of this share transfer letter to Zheng Yujie. At that time, Poplar Fruit transferred the shares to Zheng Yujie for free. That was not only because Zheng Yujie had helped him raise 100 million ransom, nor was it because he owed Zheng Yujie in his heart. There was affection and righteousness in this. Affection and righteousness, when put together, meant one thing, and when taken apart, meant another. Zheng Yujie's action now seemed to be returning the shares to its rightful owner, but it was also related to these two words. It was just that she returned the affection and kept the righteousness. To be honest, Poplar Fruit really didn't care about the shares that others thought were valuable. Even if it was normal times and Zheng Yujie wanted to transfer the shares to him, he wouldn't mind signing it. However, Zheng Yujie's face was full of tears at the moment, and her eyes showed that she had lost her soul. Poplar Fruit couldn't even lift the pen in his hand. Poplar Fruit gently closed the document, put it on the table and closed his eyes. 2 lines of tears fell from his long eyelashes. "Why are you doing this?" Poplar Fruit asked with a trembling voice. Chapter 1447. Poplar Fruit let out a long sigh and threw the document on the table. He rubbed his aching eyebrows and wiped away his tears. "I won't sign this." From his expression, anyone could see that he was very resistant. "Why?" Zheng Yujie was confused and asked without rhyme or reason. "Why?" Yang Guo was even more baffled as she asked the question back. Zheng Yujie stared blankly at poplar fruit. Her tears flowed slowly, but as if it had nothing to do with her. She repeatedly muttered, "Why? Why?" Poplar fruit didn't say anything and waited quietly. Zheng Yujie seemed to have slowly recovered some of her spirit. She asked sadly, "Aren't you going to get married?" Her voice was dull, but it was the bitterness that spiraled up from the bottomless abyss. Poplar fruit was stunned. Countless clues flashed through his mind. Of course, he was no longer the hothead of the past. Although his EQ wasn't high, he could still grasp the reason why Zheng Yujie was sad. It should be the program that was broadcast not long ago. Poplar fruit smiled bitterly, but more than that, he felt guilty. He looked at Zheng Yujie and said softly, "Yujie, you should know that Beibei and I have already registered our marriage. What we still owe now is a formal wedding. So strictly speaking, I am already married." Poplar fruit didn't know what to say next. "That's different." Zheng Yujie pursed her lips and tears poured out. "What's different?" Poplar fruit was confused. He really didn't know what a formal wedding meant to women. "It's different." Zheng Yujie stubbornly raised her head, and a few drops of tears fell on the table. "But you can understand that this is already a fact." Poplar fruit probably didn't understand that a man's rationality would never work in front of a woman's emotions. "Facts my ass." Zheng Yujie wanted to burst into tears, but with her personality, crying silently in front of poplar fruit was already her limit. The more she thought about it, the more upset she became. She kicked poplar fruit under the table. Hiss. This little girl's kick was really ruthless. She was already 30 years old. Why was she still so unstable? Poplar fruit's calf bone was kicked by Zheng Yujie, and he immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. Even he couldn't help but stretch out his hand to rub it. It wasn't easy for him to recover. "What do you want?" Poplar fruit asked helplessly. "Sign it." Zheng Yujie pointed at the document on the table and said coldly. "No." Poplar fruit shook his head firmly. He had a feeling that if he really signed it, the two of them wouldn't even be friends anymore. It was as if the two of them would gradually drift apart in the future, from being familiar with each other to not being willing to greet each other when they met, and then eventually becoming passers-by. Although it was just a vague feeling, poplar fruit didn't want to touch the consequences. "Other than this, I can promise you anything," poplar fruit said. Zheng Yujie's red phoenix eyes twitched, and she asked in a very unhappy voice, "You're even willing to divorce Fong Beibei?" Poplar fruit looked at her helplessly and didn't say anything. Zheng Yujie had just wiped away her tears, but now she was drowned by the sadness in her heart. She raised her head unconvinced, wiped away the new tears and said, "You don't dare to do it, right? Then why are you still saying such big words?" "Hey Yujie." Poplar fruit didn't know what to say. He hesitated for a moment and said, "Happiness can't be forced. You should know what I mean." "Yes, it can't be forced. But have you ever forced it for me?" Zheng Yujie took a sip of water to hide the endless grievances in her heart. She couldn't help but ask, "Have you ever given me a chance?" Poplar fruit was sad. He knew that he had mistreated Zheng Yujie, but he could only do so. On one side was his confidant, and on the other side was his girlfriend, who had been with him day and night, who had gone through trials and tribulations with him, and now even his wife. How could poplar fruit choose? Indeed, poplar fruit was a little conservative and realistic when it came to relationships. In a sense, poplar fruit was a little like Lu Yunran in the past. He didn't look forward to a vigorous life, nor did he pursue a life of luxury, nor did he need a fleeting love. He only wanted to patiently and carefully manage his happy little family. Back then, Lu Yunran had turned and left him in Kiki. She had left him in a sad situation. If it hadn't been for Kiki, he estimated that he wouldn't have been able to walk out of this relationship in half a year, or even a few years. He couldn't bear to affect and hurt Lu Yunran's marriage after his glory, but that didn't mean that poplar fruit didn't hate Lu Yunran in his heart. Even if Fong Beibei hadn't appeared in his world, even if Lu Yunran had changed her mind, poplar fruit would never have accepted her. Fortunately, Fong Beibei's appearance was like a little sun that warmed his heart and brought a brilliance to his life that was different from Kiki's. This girl was like Kiki. They were both fairies that God had given him. Not to mention that both of them had the same worldview and values. Fang Beibei's love for Kiki from the beginning had made Poplar Fruit's heart throb with excitement. Of course, other than their relationship as a daughter, Poplar Fruit's feelings for Fang Beibei were also quite deep. Apart from the kinship that they had cultivated earlier than other couples, love had never been absent from their lives. Although they had lived together for a long time and seemed like an old married couple, they would have candlelight dinners from time to time, surprise gifts from time to time, and romantic trips a few times a year. Moreover, the two of them had already registered their marriage, but they still owed a wedding that would only be held next year. With Poplar Fruit's character, how could he give up his originally happy family and give his arms to his confidant? Yes, Poplar Fruit owed Zheng Yujie, but this wasn't a reason for him to lose his rationality and have an affair. Others might, but not Poplar Fruit, who had a daughter, Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit was very clear about this, and so was Zheng Yujie. She felt very tired, the kind of tiredness that came from running a marathon but never seeing the end. Looking at Poplar Fruit's silence, Zheng Yujie felt even more uncomfortable. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, there was a touch of determination. She pushed the document over and said softly, "Sign it. Like you said, it's good for you and for me." Poplar Fruit was very flustered. He pushed the document away, pushed the chair away, and stood up. His knee was still on the edge of the table, but it didn't hurt. "I said I'm not signing it," Poplar Fruit shouted impatiently. This was a loss of self-control that the usually calm him had never done. He turned his head and walked out, but stopped halfway. He lowered his head and said softly, "It's very chaotic today. It's best that we all calm down. I still have something to do, so I'll leave first." Zheng Yujie was silent. Just as Poplar Fruit's hand touched the door handle of the office, she suddenly stood up and cried with tears streaming down her face, "Poplar Fruit! Everyone, don't worry. Sister Zheng's story isn't over yet." Chapter 1448. Zheng Yujie's voice trembled so much that it made Poplar Fruit's heart feel as if it was being grabbed by a small hand. He slowly turned around, only to see Zheng Yujie's thin and frail figure propping herself up on the desk. Time had not changed her appearance, but hard work and fatigue had made her healthy and hot figure become as thin as a bamboo pole. Poplar Fruit couldn't help but feel a little sour in his nose. In fact, Poplar Fruit, as a former shareholder, had not been responsible enough for the development of the new translation road. Other than being a leading figure, he hadn't provided much help to Zheng Yujie in terms of management. It could be said that Zheng Yujie had almost relied on her own strength to fight for this country and tenaciously guard it. As for Poplar Fruit, although his role as a leading figure was important, without Zheng Yujie's support, he wouldn't have been able to achieve such great success and wealth. Of course, for Poplar Fruit and Zheng Yujie, with their relationship, it didn't matter who had contributed more. However, when Poplar Fruit saw Zheng Yujie's appearance now, he suddenly understood many things that he had neglected before. Zheng Yujie's body trembled slightly, and her voice was like a candle flame swaying in the wind, trembling, making people worry that it would dissipate in the air at any time. Tell me, have you ever loved me?" This question had been used in too many romantic dramas, but at this moment, Poplar Fruit didn't feel the slightest bit of melodrama. On the contrary, that trembling voice was like a heavy hammer pounding on his heart. "I have." Poplar Fruit's answer was resolute and decisive, without a trace of hesitation. In the wind and rain, the flickering candle flame seemed to light up again. Perhaps Poplar Fruit's answer was a little pitiful and also because of guilt. But in the end, it still touched his heart. Perhaps it had also uncovered the veil of emotions that he had never faced before. Poplar Fruit still hadn't signed the document to transfer the shares. The 600 million yuan in front of him, and even more in the future, he didn't accept it. No one knew, otherwise people would definitely secretly scold him for being stupid. After he left, Zheng Yujie sat in the office in a daze for a long time until the bright sky turned dark. Her figure was also hidden in the dim shadows of the night, and the expression on her face could not be seen. Finally, there was a knock on the office door. Her assistant poked her head in and looked at her boss. Without turning on the lights, she said softly, "Sister Zheng, are you going to eat? You've been off work for a long time. Do you want me to bring you some food?" Zhang Yujia's voice could be heard. Turn on the lights. It's a little dark. It was too dark. Outside, the lights were already on. The assistant turned on the lights in the office. Seeing that Zhang Yujia's makeup had been washed away by tears, but there were no more tear stains, she secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Zhang Yujia stayed in the office for almost half the afternoon. In the middle, she came in to pour a few glasses of water, but all she saw was Zhang Yujia's shoulders shaking. Of course, although the assistant had a close relationship with Zhang Yujia, she didn't dare to rush forward to comfort Zhang Yujia. Zhang Yujia wasn't a woman who needed others to comfort her. What puzzled the assistant was that when Poplar Fruit came over, not only did it not make Zhang Yujia as happy as my daughter like before, but it also made Zhang Yujia sadder. But fortunately, it seemed that now, her boss had adjusted herself. After turning on the lights, Zhang Yujia stood up, took the document that had been on the table for a long time, walked to the shredder at the back, and shredded it. Then she began to pack her bag. Sister Zhang, are you going home? The assistant asked in surprise. Do you want me to drive you home? Recently, Zhang Yujia's overtime had become a little crazy. She even stayed in the office for the past 2 weeks. Although the company did have a new big move, this behavior was not normal. Zhang Yujia smiled slightly. She looked at her assistant. This girl was actually not very smart, but she was very attentive and thoughtful. She once wanted to train her to be the company's management, but in the end, she let her stay as her assistant according to her wishes. Yes, let's go have a meal first, then go home and have a good sleep. You come with me for a meal, then drive me home. Zhang Yujia stretched her waist. Her tired body suddenly became hot. She said somewhat lazily, I won't come tomorrow. I'll rest for a day. Oh, okay. The assistant was somewhat not used to Zhang Yujia's normal situation at this moment. Picking up her bag and walking out, Zhang Yujia casually patted the assistant's shoulder and said earnestly, Women, you have to cherish yourself, even if you don't have anyone to love you. The assistant weakly said, Sister Zhang, I have a boyfriend. Hey. Zhang Yujia was so angry that she laughed. Her coquettish voice finally recovered. Lu Xiaoni, do you want to die? In front of the assistant's desk, Zhang Yujia half leaned on the edge, lazily watching her pack her things. She glanced at something that looked like a movie ticket and suspiciously asked, Are you going to watch a movie? Charlotte. Trouble? What movie? The name is a little strange. She directly picked it up and looked at the time. It was tonight. Or today. The assistant blushed, nodded, and said a little embarrassedly, Today is our 2nd anniversary. Openly showing off your love in front of me. Zhang Yujia gently knocked the assistant's head. She saw that the assistant was a little nervous, and said with a dazzling smile, Okay, I'm not blaming you. I didn't pay attention and almost let you stand him up. Zhang Yujia put down the movie ticket, then picked up her car key, shook it and said with a smile, You don't have to send me today, I'll drive myself. The assistant anxiously waved her hand and said, No, Sister Zhang, our movie will start very late, it won't delay things. Let me send you. Don't say no, I'll give you a break tonight. If you don't want to go, then you're not allowed to go tonight. Zhang Yujia stared at her, then smiled and said, Okay, look at what you're saying, it's like I don't know how to drive. The two of you should enjoy your happiness. By the way, take my membership card, you can get a discount when you go to the West Coast. Sister Zhang. The assistant looked at Zhang Yujia with some gratitude. Don't be too touched, I also want you to be happy. Don't be like me. Zhang Yujia's voice was a little low, and her voice was not very clear. Sister Zhang. When she left the company, the assistant ran over again and said to Zhang Yujia with a smile, By the way, I forgot to tell you. That movie is called Charlotte's Trouble, not Charlotte's Trouble. What kind of movie is it? It has such a strange name. It's true, I heard that it's very good. So many people recommended it. Sister Zhang. Why don't you go and have a look tomorrow? Just take it as a relaxation. No way, haha. Why did she mention this movie? Everyone can guess. Chapter 1449. There were still a few days before the last trip, but it was already the National Day holiday. Poplar Fruit went home early. Anyway, the school had already fallen into the carnival of the students. He made a sumptuous dinner, and then went to pick up Fong Beibei and Kiki. In the back seat, Fong Beibei and Kiki were chatting. I heard that you had music class today. What song did the teacher teach you? When it came to this topic, Chi-Chi didn't seem very happy. She pouted and said, "Speaking of this, my heart is filled with sorrow." Poplar Fruit in the front seat almost burst out laughing. Now that Kiki was exposed to a wider world, it wasn't the first time she said something shocking. Poplar Fruit turned the steering wheel and asked with a smile, "Why are you sad?" "Yeah, don't you like singing very much? Why do you feel sad?" Fong Beibei was also convulsing with laughter as she asked in confusion. "Because I think the teacher's teaching is very childish." The little girl pouted and said, singing again and again, "I feel that it's not good." "For example? What do you think is not good?" Fong Beibei asked curiously. "For example, Teacher Wu taught Little Rabbit be good." Kiki stretched out 2 fingers and hooked them on her forehead, like a rabbit's ear, and then sang, "Little Rabbit be good, open the door." Kiki sang very well, but it was obvious that she was still not satisfied. "It's quite good. Why do you say it's not good?" Fong Beibei asked. "Because I think these are all songs sung by children." Kiki gestured with her small arms and legs and said, "I'm so much taller than them, I can't sing children's songs anymore." "You're only 4 years old, okay?" Fong Beibei smiled and pinched Kiki's cute little nose. Kiki was indeed very young, but one could not deny that Kiki was precocious and intelligent. To make a young lady who could sing all living things, without breaking her voice the entire time learn to sing, "Little Bunny Be Good," was really hard on her. "And what about Teacher Mike? Don't you like Teacher Mike playing the piano the most?" Fong Beibei asked. "Teacher Mike taught Twinkle, Twinkle_Little_Star, but I just like to listen to him play the piano." Kiki nodded honestly and said, "Actually, I know how to sing a lot of times. Then I have to sing it over and over again. It's so boring." After complaining for a while, Kiki began to happily tell her parents about other interesting things. However, even though the young lady only grumbled for a while, Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei began to take it seriously. In the past, Poplar Fruit was indeed not very willing to be like other parents, waving a stick and urging Kiki to start all sorts of tuition classes early. Just like Big Sis Wang's daughter in the same neighborhood, she was learning English and mathematics in kindergarten. On the weekends she had to learn piano, zither, and international dance. After a week, not only did the children not have time to play, the adults also had to accompany them to school on the weekends. Similarly, the grandparents had to carry bags and water bottles to wait on them. It was really tough. Poplar Fruit advocated a happy and free childhood. Just like when he was young, running around naked in the fields, that was his unregrettable youth. Okay, it seems like something was wrong. But obviously, freedom was hard to find in this Steel City. Even if Poplar Fruit stayed by his daughter's side all day long, it would be difficult to find a companion for her to play with. So, he chose to let Kiki go to kindergarten. After all, in kindergarten, Kiki could get to know more children of the same age, and learn to socialize independently after leaving her parents' side. But now, there was another problem. At night, after Kiki went to bed, Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei sat cross-legged in the living room and chatted, discussing the topic. Kiki's IQ is still higher than other children's. Letting her continue to receive such education in kindergarten is a kind of torture for her. Poplar Fruit already knew about Kiki's high IQ, but today's matter had to be taken seriously. Fong Beibei also frowned and said, "Yeah, today's matter is just a prelude, but I'm afraid that Kiki will encounter the same problem in the future. Think about it, if Chi-Chi were to learn multiplication and division like other children, learn the 24 letters of the alphabet, learn to write stroke by stroke, and learn to pinyin by sound, she would definitely feel as unhappy as she did today." Fong Beibei's analysis was right. Kiki was still in the lower class. If she was in the middle class or upper class, she would have less time to play and more things to learn, and the difference in IQ would become more and more obvious. Like other gifted children, even if Kiki did not complain like today, she would be ostracized by other children. Being a crane in a flock of chickens sometimes meant that the bird that stood out would be shot. But she can't not go to kindergarten. Poplar Fruit waved his hand and said, she needs to get in touch with other children. If she stays at home all the time, her character will become antisocial. What was the biggest motivation for Kiki to go to kindergarten now? It was not going to class, not listening to teacher Mike play the piano, and not because she could get any honor or reward. It was because of her friends that she could not forget. Of course, participating in Where Are We Going, Dad? Also made Kiki look forward to her 4 best friends. In contrast, Kong Kong, Nuai Dejun and Xian Xian, who seemed to be more mature, had a deeper friendship with Kiki. Can she go to kindergarten for half a day and then bring the rest of the time to school? The school that Fong Beibei was talking about was, of course, Higashiyama University that she and Poplar Fruit were in. I remember that there are many piano and taekwondo classes near the school. Since she doesn't like what she learned in kindergarten, why not come to school? Poplar Fruit frowned and said, then what's the difference between that and other parents? Forcing the child to learn this and that all day long. Also, if she wants to learn taekwondo, why don't I teach her better kung fu? Look at how stubborn you are. Fong Beibei stretched out her finger and poked Poplar Fruit's forehead. She smiled and said, let's not talk about taekwondo. Let's talk about piano. Do you think Kiki likes piano? Every day when she comes back, she says that teacher Mike plays the piano so well. Poplar Fruit nodded honestly. Since she likes it, then let her learn. It's not considered forcing her. We're letting her develop her own interests freely. Fong Beibei waved her hand and said, you can let Kiki choose for herself. If she likes to learn to play the piano or the guitar, you can enroll her in the classes that she likes. What if she doesn't like it after learning it? Poplar Fruit asked. You're worried that Kiki doesn't have patience, right? Isn't there still you? You can reason with her before she starts, so that she can learn to be responsible for her own choices. Fong Beibei smiled and said, of course, if she finds out later that she really doesn't like it, then she doesn't have to go. Anyway, as a father, you're so good at making money. You wouldn't care about such a small registration fee, right? Letting Kiki choose the direction that she wanted to learn wasn't to erase Kiki's free and happy childhood. It was just to let Kiki's excessive talent be properly displayed. He believed that Kiki would also like Poplar Fruit's arrangement. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, so simple and crude? But I like it. Hee hee. Chapter 1450. The day before their departure, Poplar Fruit and Kiki welcomed 4 other families in Yangcheng. Besides Xianxian, Dajuan, Nuai, Kong Kong and their parents, there was also Xuanxuan's brother Hao Hao, Nuai's sister Nina, and another person that had never appeared before. It was Kong Kong's older sister, Jiu'er. Jiu'er was different from these little fellows. She was a great beauty who had grown into a slender and elegant woman. She was almost as tall as her mother. Jiu'er's birthday was less than a month ago. At 14 or 15 years old, she was destined to be unable to play as much as her younger siblings. However, her personality wasn't bad. As long as she was around, she would be pestered by Kong Kong. This scene made Kiki quite envious. She also hoped to have a younger brother or sister pestering her. The main reason for everyone's arrival was that they would be taking a flight from Yangcheng, so they needed to stay in Yangcheng a day in advance. As the host, Poplar Fruit was generous. Other than treating them to a meal, he also actively arranged their accommodations. The production crew had their own hotel, but Poplar Fruit still decided to invite the 4 families to stay in his house. Logically speaking, Poplar Fruit's house couldn't accommodate so many people. However, in reality, Poplar Fruit had already bought the duplex across the street 2 years ago. It was originally for his family to have a place to stay when they came over from their hometown. Now it was just right to settle down nearly 20 people. Of course, living at home was still a little worse than living in a hotel. However, the atmosphere of the gathering was rare. The children could excitedly run around and play together, and the adults also had a comfortable environment to chat and improve their relationships. Kiki was the happiest when her friends came home. She brought Goldie to welcome them. Then, she jumped up and down, bringing her friends to her room on the 2nd floor to see her toy collection. Although most of the toys were for girls such as Barbie dolls, There were still some that Poplar Fruit bought for his collection that ended up as Kiki's toys. For example, the miniaturized Iron Man ornaments, the Frostmourne model of Arthas from Blizzard, and many cute plastic dinosaur models. This caused the young boys to shout excitedly in the girls' boudoir, which attracted the attention of Poplar Fruit downstairs. Dinner was naturally eaten at home. Fong Bei bought the groceries, and then Poplar Fruit, who was finally free to show off his culinary skills, personally cooked. Although there were no people from the program crew filming, the 5 families still had a lively time. Except for the fact that they had to catch a flight tomorrow. Everyone raised their glasses to thank Poplar Fruit's family for their hospitality. They wished that the friendship between the 5 families and the children would last forever. However, the atmosphere of celebration did not last long, because in the old man Lin Yongjin's routine speech, he inadvertently let something slip. "This is the last time." Kiki's reaction was the strongest. The little girl immediately grabbed her father's hand and looked at him with pitiful eyes, hoping to get the denial she wanted from her father. It's not the last time Papa is going anywhere, right? In fact, Poplar Fruit didn't want Kiki to record the last 2 episodes with a sad mood, so he kept it a secret. Later on, when they were truly separated, Chi-Chi was actually able to accept it a little more. But in the end he still couldn't hide it. Poplar Fruit didn't blame Lin Yongjian. After all, this was just his own extravagant hope. How could he keep it a secret forever? Not only Kiki, but the other friends who had already known were depressed at this moment. Dejun, who was particularly emotional, had already begun to wipe his tears. Poplar Fruit looked at the fathers embarrassedly. He lowered his head, held his daughter in his arms and said softly, "That's right. Let's go out tomorrow. That's the last time we'll record it. Where is Papa going?" "I don't want to." Kiki's eyes immediately turned red. She grabbed her father's clothes and squeezed her little face into her father's arms sadly. Although in the past 7 trips, the process had been bitter and happy, crying and laughing, and the thrilling experience of being kidnapped, the experience of more than half a year was the most unforgettable memory in Kiki's life. It was not that she didn't want to give up the opportunity to travel with her father, because even if they didn't participate in the show, Poplar Fruit would still take the little girl and Fong Bei to travel. They even went back to some exotic beaches and cities. Compared to recording a show, it was much easier and less torturous. However, Kiki just couldn't bear to leave these good friends, these uncles who cared about her very much, and also the village head, the assistant sister, the cameraman, and other lovely people whom she had become familiar with along the way. Kiki's soft sobs broke the somewhat tense atmosphere. Her emotions also stirred up the other 4 little boys at the same time. Of course Jiur, Nina, and Hao didn't have such feelings. After all, they had participated in very little. Poplar Fruit apologetically clapped hands with everyone. In order not to affect everyone's mood, he carried Kiki to the balcony to talk, leaving Fong Bei to continue to entertain everyone. Outside the balcony, Poplar Fruit could still hear Kiki constantly asking why. He explained softly, "But this is the arrangement of our show. 8 trips, 16 episodes. You've watched the first and second seasons, so you should understand." Everyone understood the reason, but Kiki just couldn't accept it. She twisted her little head on her father's chest, wiping her tears on her father's lapel as she said, But I don't want it to end. I want to play with Brother Kong, Brother Nuyi, Brother Dajuan, and Xian. I don't want to never see them again." Poplar Fruit patted Kiki's back, letting her cry. After letting out the pain in her heart, he cupped the little girl's delicate little face and said softly, "Silly, we're just not recording the show. It's not like we won't be able to see them in the future. Look." Poplar Fruit guided Kiki's teary eyes to look into the house. Behind the floor-to-ceiling windows, the big living room could be seen clearly. On the long table, under Fong Bei's mediation, some happy things livened up the atmosphere, and everyone began to talk and laugh again. "We're not recording the show now, but we can still play with Xian and the others," Poplar Fruit said. "Even if we don't have many opportunities to travel together in the future, Dad can still take you to the capital, to the mountains to play with them." Kiki shook her head, pouted, and said, "That's not the same." The little girl knew how to make comparisons. Her growth had indeed surpassed her peers by too much. There are some things that we can't avoid, but it hasn't become too bad. At least, the friendship between us fathers and children is still there. And it can continue to be good, right? Isn't that enough? So Poplar Fruit didn't say too much. He just smiled faintly and helped his daughter slowly braid her soft long hair into small braids, allowing her to sort out her emotions. Chi-Chi could understand because she had also experienced this kind of difficult parting before. The parting with little Seven and Luo Danny. Of course, she didn't experience it as deeply as she did now that she had grown up, but Chi-Chi was still able to adjust. After she stopped crying, she gently held her father's hand and shook it. Poplar Fruit looked at Kiki with a smile, took her hand and said, let's go back and cherish the last trip. The last time. Chapter 1451. At noon the next day, everyone packed their luggage and headed to the airport. The program team was all ready. This time, Southern Airlines even provided the program team with a chartered flight service. Including the staff, nearly 200 people boarded the plane. There was a small interlude. The mommies group, Nina, and the other guests had to sit in business class first and then hide. The program required them to appear the next day, and it had to be a surprise. So, they had to deliberately create an illusion that they didn't follow them. Southern Airlines service was very, very thoughtful. The fathers registered with their children. The captain and stewardess were already standing at the door of the business class, welcoming them with smiles. Not only that, but they also gave the children a Where Are We Going, Dad theme pillow specially prepared by Southern Airlines. Each child had a pillow with their own picture printed on it. Thank you, Auntie. Kiki smiled sweetly. She was polite and appropriate, just like an elegant little lady. But as soon as she turned her head, she giggled and rushed into the pillow fight between her other 4 brothers. Seeing the pillows flying, the cameraman almost got shot, and even the cold and arrogant President Kong joined in the fight. People couldn't help but sigh. The children were really energetic. Of course, before that, the 3 other children in the mommies group also received pillows as gifts. However, those were the same as the ones in Poplar Fruit's hands. One side was printed with a group photo, and the other side was printed with a Where Are We Going, Dad logo. Finally, the children who were excited when they boarded the plane were appeased. They were excited because they were with their friends. They each sat in their own seats and fastened their seat belts. The plane slowly flew into the sky. Every child sat next to their father. Poplar Fruit turned to look at Kiki. She was smoothing the wrinkles on the pillow with her white and tender hands with a distressed look on her face. Now you know how to feel distressed. Poplar Fruit teased his daughter with a smile and said, why were you so excited about the battle just now? I was crazy, Kiki said in the camera with annoyance. I'm not beautiful anymore. The first sentence almost made the audience laugh out loud. Kiki seemed to have learned a way to ridicule herself recently, and it sounded even cuter. It's okay. Go back and ask your mother to iron it for you. It will look good. Poplar Fruit laughed. It was only then that Chi-Chi became happy again. She scrutinized the cartoon character. Of course, Kiki knew that it was her, but when she compared it, she realized that she could also be this cute. The little girl giggled happily. Kiki, what are you laughing at? It wasn't easy for her to ask for leave, so she didn't have to stay in the classroom in school. Fong Beibei couldn't sit still. After the plane stabilized, she unbuckled her seatbelt and went to the back to find Yanghua and Chi-Chi. Poplar Fruit held Kiki in his arms. Since the seat was big, it wasn't crowded for him to sit with Kiki. He let Fong Beibei sit in the inner seat. He shrugged and said with a smile, she's obsessed with this pillow now. Let me see. Fong Beibei took the pillow from Kiki. This is mine, hee. The little girl reached out and pointed at her cartoon character on the pillow. She was a little proud, but also a little embarrassed. Wow, it's so cute. Fong Beibei laughed. Even mine isn't as pretty as this. Is it like this? Poplar Fruit took out his own pillow from behind and handed it to her. Yes. Fong Beibei looked at it and said, yours doesn't have a profile picture. Only Kiki has one. So is mine called limited edition? Kiki saw the word from the TV commercials and asked happily. It's more than limited edition. Poplar Fruit smiled and rubbed Kiki's little head and said, Yours is the only one in the world. Fong Beibei also handed it over and asked her to keep it safe with a smile. Then Ma, help me hold it. Kiki pushed it back. Her delicate little face had a serious beauty at the moment. Why? Fong Beibei was a little confused. One had to know that Chi-Chi had always possessed a very strong possessiveness and desire to protect the things she liked. Just like her Barbie doll, these toys were all packed up by her. Moreover, other boys' toys would be broken in a few days, but Kiki's Barbie doll has been played with for a few years and was combed by her as if it was new. Ma, help me pack it up. Papa and I are going to record a program. Kiki pushed it again. She looked around and saw that the cameraman was not filming her. She whispered secretly, We are recording a program, so we can't bring our own things. If we bring it, the village chief will confiscate it. So that's how it is. Fong Beibei smiled and said, That's fine. But you don't have to worry now. You can give it to me when you get off the plane. Kiki took it back. She was a little worried and said, Then Ma, when you go back, you can help me make it into a fish. Iron the iron. Poplar Fruit reminded. Yes, you mean to make it as beautiful as before? Kiki said in a different way. Sure. Mama will go back and try it. There should be no problem. Fong Beibei smiled. The Southern Airlines plane still provided a lot of delicious food. During the long flight, Kiki played until she was tired and slept. When she woke up, she ate. After eating, she continued to play and sleep. Finally, the plane arrived in Perth, Western Australia. As soon as they got off the plane, they didn't stay for long. After sending the group of mothers and Jiu to the hotel, most of the staff of the program, along with the 5 pairs of fathers and children, went to the beach in the Margaret River area to begin the recording of this trip. It's so beautiful. Along the way, the motorcade passed through the bustling city, beautiful pastures and small forests with many cute animals. Kiki felt that her eyes were not enough, and kept sighing. Did you see a kangaroo? There might be a koala in here. Poplar Fruit also seemed to like the natural environment here. He and his daughter leaned against the window and looked out. I know, a koala likes to sleep. It's a lazy bug. Kiki giggled. But I've seen it before. It can even eat leaves when it's sleeping. I've decided. The next time our family goes on a trip, we'll come to Australia, okay? Poplar Fruit patted his thigh and said happily, This place is very big. We can go and see real koalas and kangaroos. What about the kangaroo? Will the kangaroo use its bag to carry me away? Hehehe. The little girl obviously said this on purpose. She thought it was very funny. I'm going to learn from the kangaroo. Then, I'll buy a bag and carry you when I go out. Poplar Fruit deliberately scared the little girl. Chapter 1452. What? The moment Yang Gua and her father saw a white man dressed as a primitive man, the comfortable feeling of seeing the vast and boundless sea as blue as the sky suddenly disappeared. The children's feelings were not as complicated as the adults. They did not think so much at all. In the beginning, they were scared, confused. Then, the primitive man wearing animal skin magically succeeded in making fire by drilling wood and dancing strangely with fragrant lavender in front of them. Gradually, the children became less scared. Instead, they watched curiously. What is he doing? The dads began to ask the primitive man, in very poor English. After listening to him mumbling for a while, they found that the primitive man could not understand English with a heavy local accent. At this time, Zhou Shimin had an idea. He turned to Poplar Fruit and asked, Poplar Fruit, what did he say? That's right. Didn't they still have Yang Gua, the royal-level super translator? Poplar Fruit did not want to be in the limelight, but seeing Zhou Shimin and the other dads' curious eyes, Poplar Fruit translated for them. He said that he wanted to paint us with an ancient paint that had been used by his tribe for hundreds of years. Poplar Fruit looked at the primitive man playing with a small jar and said, Don't worry. Ouch. As soon as he finished speaking, the primitive man stretched out a greasy finger and drew a line on his face. Well, Poplar Fruit was the first to fall for the trick. He could only blame himself for being able to communicate with the primitive man smoothly. The primitive man had already regarded him as one of his own. It was his honor to be the first to cut him. Poplar Fruit's exclamation made Zhou Shimin and the others nervous. What? Poplar Fruit, what's wrong with you? In fact, nothing had happened. It was the cold and greasy paint that made Poplar Fruit unable to react for a while. However, Poplar Fruit did not want to answer properly at this time. He said to the other guests in a funny way, "No, he just told me that the paint can't be washed off. Look, the paint on his face has been on for decades." Poplar Fruit looked serious. In addition, the primitive man was really talking to Poplar Fruit just now. The dads all exclaimed, No, Papa is lying." Kiki giggled and said, "He said that it can be washed off." Kiki's English was the best among all the foreign languages she knew. After all, English was the most popular language. Poplar Fruit usually used English with foreigners, not some rare African language. Kiki was influenced by what she saw and heard, so she learned it more smoothly. Everyone roared with laughter. They did not admire Kiki's language skills. Instead, they applauded Kiki's deceptive behavior. "How can you undermine your father like this?" Poplar Fruit gently rubbed Kiki's hair and laughed. Everyone obediently allowed the primitive to paint their faces. However, the appearance of the village head in the same attire did not give the fathers a heartless surprise like the children did. Instead, it gave them an ominous premonition that made them uneasy. Sure enough, the extremely annoying village chief told everyone that the theme of this trip was Return to the Stone Age. This time, they also had to change their costumes, but it was not a simple cosplay. Instead, everyone had to put on simple animal skins and start a survival journey similar to that of the primitive man. Sure enough, this season, the program team was going to torment everyone to the end. It was already the last day, but in the end, they were still unwilling to let everyone go. The previous 2 seasons were not so harsh. The last trip could be said to be a completely blissful vacation for the guests. Alright, there was no other way. They could only follow the program team's flow and continue playing the game. Poplar Fruit and Zhou Shimin were strong and ran fast. Although they brought along the gaming black hole Lin Yongjian, they still won the game of carrying babies relay. However, the 3 of them were not willing to fight for the comfortable accommodation halfway up the mountain. Instead, they voluntarily chose a simple animal skin tent by the sea with strong winds and waves. This is the last episode. Cherish this opportunity to experience it. Zhou Shimin said to Poplar Fruit with a smile. Poplar Fruit nodded in agreement. He thought so too. There would be plenty of opportunities to travel comfortably in the future. Anyway, they did not lack the money. However, after this trip, no one would arrange such painful yet enjoyable games and competitions in the future. After becoming primitive men, the most important thing was to find food to fill their stomachs. They did not eat much in the morning, so the children were hungry. Poplar Fruit, Zhou Shimin, and Lin Yongjian went to the animal skin tent. After discussing it, they decided to go out and look for ingredients. Of course, this was also the program team's request. Poplar Fruit and the others originally wanted to leave Lin Yongjian behind to look after the children, but the program team did not allow it. Kiki, when the fathers go out later, you Xianxian and Dajuan must be careful. Although the program team staff would look after them, Poplar Fruit was still worried and reminded them, "Don't go into the sea. Don't play in the water." Usually Poplar Fruit was not so serious, but this time was different. This time, they were facing the cold and merciless sea. The old people in the village often said, "Bully the mountains, not the water." If they fell in the mountains, they would only break their arms and legs. If they were swept away by the waves, they might not even be able to find their bodies. In the complicated environment of the sea, regardless of whether they were children or adults, whether they could swim or not, Kiki was still smiling just now and did not take it to heart. But when she saw her father's super serious and even a little angry look, the little girl was frightened and became serious. "Listen to Uncle and Auntie, be good." Poplar Fruit's expression softened a little. He patted his daughter's little head and smiled slightly. "Papa, don't worry." The little girl obediently gave her father a hug. On the other side, Lin Yongjian was also reminding Dajuan, "You are the big brother, so you have to take good care of your younger brothers and sisters. You can't let them go into the water, and you can't go into the water yourself, understand?" Dajun looked at his father in a daze and nodded as if he didn't fully understand. However, did he really have to take care of the two little ones? This was still a little mysterious, because this kid still needed others to take care of him. Could he take care of others? Poplar Fruit did not stay any longer. He, Zhou Shimin, and Lin Yongjian took the bamboo pole and went hunting. Along the way he kept complaining. Not to mention anything else. What could a bamboo pole do when they went hunting? It would not hurt a person, and if it hit a kangaroo, it would not even be enough to tickle the kangaroo. Perhaps even the primitive people of the Stone Age would not be so stupid, right? We are going to catch seafood. Finally, the staff told them the right direction. It turned out that they were not going to catch kangaroos. Australia's most famous delicacies were their seafood. Catch lobsters. Make something delicious for the little ones. The fathers shouted excitedly, and they immediately became excited. Chapter 1453. The water quality in Western Australia was very good, especially in Perth. Its ocean current came from the sea that connected with Antarctica, and the air was the same. The cold air from Antarctica blew northward, and there was almost no pollution from industrial particles. The seafood here was of course the best of the best. Although the price was not as high as the lobsters from South Australia, the lobsters from Western Australia were also very popular in China. The wholesale price of a medium-sized lobster was more than $300 per catty. But catching lobsters was not an easy job. Poplar Fruit and the others ran to a rocky beach near the sea. There were strange rocks, gaps, and seawater. It was a good place for lobsters and other aquatic creatures to live. However, it was because of these gaps that Poplar Fruit and the others suffered. It's not easy to catch. Lin Yongjian looked at them with his hands on his waist and shook his head. Just now, he saw a lobster that was not too big, but when he squatted down, the lobster had already run away. Now Poplar Fruit and Zhou Shimin took over from Lin Yongjian, who had a weak waist, and continued to squat next to the gaps. However, the water was murky with the bamboo pole, but there was not even a trace of the lobster. Poplar Fruit was a little regretful. Because he came a little late, he and Zhou Shimin did not see any lobsters. "Let's split up. I think there is still a lot of seafood here," Zhou Shimin suggested. "Why don't we not catch it first? Let's come together and think of a way." Lin Yongjian felt that it was a little difficult to catch lobsters by himself. It was decided that the three fathers would split up to look for lobsters. When it came to catching seafood, Poplar Fruit actually had some experience. After all, he was also a child who lived by the sea. Moreover, Poplar Fruit was born in the countryside. Even if he had not gone out to sea to fish, he had played with his parents at a relative's house who was a professional fisherman. At that time, a fishing boat that was bigger than a speedboat came back from the deep sea, full of big fish the size of an arm. That was the symbol of a harvest. What excited Poplar Fruit and the other cousins the most were the scallops, crabs, and palm-sized prawns that the fishermen picked out for sale. It wasn't that these seafood were worthless, but that they were too scattered and couldn't be sold for a good price. They might as well leave it for their own family to eat. The children were even more excited. After the boat was docked, they climbed up one by one and rolled around in the boat, chasing the prawns that were jumping around, or teasing the crabs that had not yet realized the danger and slowly ran a race. Returning to reality from his memory, the Poplar Fruit carefully rummaged through the cracks in the rocks that were soaked in seawater. Finally, he saw a crab. Catching crabs required quick eyes and quick hands. Don't be fooled by this fellow's arrogance and stupidity. In the water, it was very fast. Moreover, the crab's pincers were also very fierce. When the Poplar Fruit was young, it had been pinched by the pincers and cried loudly. Fortunately, it did not leave any psychological trauma. This allowed him to figure out a way to catch crabs. He saw Poplar Fruit lying on the edge of the crevice. He didn't get too close, but his eyes were sharp as he stared at the crab. Suddenly his hand shot out like lightning. Finger tap. The crab was pressed down by the Poplar Fruit's finger. Its body couldn't move. Its hook-like long legs and large pincers flailed, but it couldn't reach the Tathagata divine finger that poplar fruit pressed in the middle of its back. Yang Guo was somewhat proud of himself. He hadn't used this skill for more than 10 years, but he hadn't become rusty. On the contrary, because of his super-fast speed and the accuracy and ruthlessness of his attacks, he seemed to be even more powerful than before. The poplar fruit grabbed the crab's shell and abdomen from behind and grabbed it. He shouted at Zhou Shimin and company, "I caught it! I caught a crab!" It was just a crab, but Zhou Shimin and Lin Yongjian excitedly surrounded it and looked at it for a long time. "Where do you want to put it?" the poplar fruit asked. That's right. He didn't bring a bamboo basket. Of course, the program team didn't provide it at all. Lin Yongjian looked around and finally found a piece of animal skin that could be removed from his body. In fact, it was also a woven fabric, and the quality was similar to a plastic bag. He made a small bag with this piece of animal skin and carefully put their first prey into it. Continue to look. Catch more. Zhou Shimin said excitedly. Poplar fruit's crab gave them hope. Moreover, how could one crab be enough to eat? On one side, the fathers were busy catching seafood. On the other side, the children began a fairy tale-like drama adventure. It was called a drama because the 3 children didn't know that the 2 blonde women in front of them were actors invited by the program team. They were wearing strange clothes, lying on the beach, stretching out their hands and shouting from time to time, "Help, help." Chi-Chi took the lead and ran over while Xian-Xian and De-Jun became timid. On one hand, they felt a natural sense of unfamiliarity towards these blonde-haired, blue-eyed women who spoke a strange language. On the other hand, the other party's fishtail-like feet seemed to have mutated, causing them to shrink back in fear. Kiki was much better. She had been abroad many times and had long been used to foreigners. She was very curious and ran over to chat with the other party. "What's wrong with you?" She spoke in English. "We're swimming here. You're wearing so little. Don't you feel cold?" Kiki didn't wait for the other party to finish speaking. She looked curiously at the other party's clothes, which almost exposed half of her chest and bare arms. It was spring in Australia. It was still a little cold in spring. Didn't you see that the children were still wearing warm clothes and animal skins? It's not cold. We're in trouble here, and we want to find someone to help us. The other party tried to lead the topic back. "What's wrong with your friends? Why don't you come over?" It seemed that one of the blonde women could speak Chinese, so in order to not scare Xian-Xian and De-Jun, they deliberately spoke a few words in Mandarin. "Xian-Xian, De-Jun, don't be afraid." After Kiki finished chatting, she ran over and pulled De-Jun, who was hiding behind a rock in fear, and said, They said that they want our help. But will they eat people?" Xian-Xian trembled and asked. He felt that the foreigners were very strange. Their hair was like a snake demon, and their skin was so pale. "They probably won't eat people, but why are they here? I think they'll take us away." De-Jun didn't think that they were monsters. He was more mature than Xian-Xian, but his thinking was a little too ridiculous. "Will you take us away?" Kiki asked. Before this, Lin Yongjian had repeatedly told De-Jun, the elder brother, to take good care of his younger siblings. But now, Chi-Chi was standing in front, while De-Jun and Xian-Xian were holding hands and cowering behind Chi-Chi. What kind of situation was this? Well, since Kiki was taller and prettier than them, Kiki could be the big sister and protect her 2 younger brothers. Chapter 1454. Don't be afraid, we are actually mermaids from the sea. The 2 blonde beauties said as they fiddled with their tails. Mermaids. De-Jun and Xian-Xian couldn't react. Mermaids. Kiki's eyes lit up. She excitedly clasped her 2 small hands and said, "Really? Are you really mermaids?" "Of course. Do you think we are beautiful?" The 2 extras blinked their eyes at Xian-Xian. "Beautiful," De-Jun said foolishly. He wasn't as afraid now, but he still tactfully went along with the mermaid's words. "Yes, but I think Kiki is more beautiful." Xian-Xian shouted in a childish voice. He Xian-Xian. Kiki was elated when she heard that, but she was still a little embarrassed. Then she shook Xian-Xian's shoulder and said, "I asked if they were beautiful. I wasn't talking about me." The mermaid's first step was successful. Then they let Kiki and Xian look at their feet. Look, we don't have feet. We are mermaids. Kiki held Xian's hand, and the two of them curiously walked closer to take a look. Dejun shook his head and pouted at the cameraman. He looked so scared that he was about to cry. I don't dare to go. Only Xian, who didn't know anything, and Kiki, who had heard many fairy tales, weren't afraid. Dejun thought about it, and felt that it was particularly scary. He. Kiki suddenly laughed. She blinked her beautiful big eyes and looked at the mermaids. I can see your feet. The props made by the program team were really clumsy. It was like the dresses of the beauties at high-end banquets. It looked long, but the slit was high enough to reach the waist. Through the camera, they could see that the soft fishtail had 2 feet twisting there. The blonde beauty who understood Chinese blushed slightly, as if she was caught doing something bad by a child. She coughed awkwardly and said, This is because our tail is going to become feet. You know. She wanted to explain clearly, but a long speech was a great test of her Chinese ability, not to mention that it was outside of the script, so she simply spoke English. Kiki, of course, also understood. She happily discussed the fairy tale of mermaids turning into humans with the other party in English. Xian, I understand. The little girl also acted as an incompetent translator and explained to her friend. They said that their tails are still tails, and then they might become feet, but they haven't become feet. Xian was confused. Even Xian's words as mouth Xian. In any case, the identity of the mermaid was finally confirmed. Xian. Teet. Teet Xian Yuan Xian. She was talking to Xian and Dejun. Kiki had been chatting with her for a long time, as if they were good friends who had not seen each other for many years. The little girl seemed to be a little familiar. However, the other 2 little ones were extremely shy. They had been too embarrassed to talk to each other. Everything was relayed to Kiki. Xian hesitated for a moment, and looked up at Kiki's inexplicably excited expression. Although it was very inexplicable, looking at the little sister's beautiful smiling face, Xian felt very relieved. He stepped forward and shook hands with the mermaid. Well, there didn't seem to be anything wrong. Her hand was soft, warm, and a little sandy, but it was no different from a real person's. Moreover, looking at them up close, Xian found that these mermaids were quite beautiful. Seeing Xian boldly shake hands with them, Dejun hesitated for a moment and also shook hands with them. His feelings were the same as Xian's, and he gradually let down his guard. The 2 of them were gradually able to chat with the mermaids. The mermaids felt that Kiki was really too cute. They originally thought that they would need to spend a lot of effort to explain the problem to the children, but Kiki was the first to come up with an explanation for them. They said, We need to go back to the sea because we can't stay on land for too long. Is it because you haven't really become human yet? Mermaids' feet need to grow before they can become human. Kiki looked at them sympathetically and said, The fairy tale of the mermaids that Poplar Fruit had told Kiki was actually an adaptation. There were no terrible and painful sacrifices. Only the mermaids worked hard and walked out of the sea, became human, and lived happily with the prince. Yes, that's it. The mermaids quickly nodded and said. Dejun let go of his fear at this time. He also felt that the mermaids were very pitiful. Kind as he was, he anxiously said, Then what should we do? The fish will die of lack of oxygen on the beach. They need to go back to the sea quickly. Can you go back to the sea? The 3 children's faces showed a worried expression. They were all very sensible and kind. We really want to go back to the sea. The mermaid who could speak Chinese said pitifully, But we have been away from the sea for too long. We don't have the strength to get up. Then what should we do? You will die. Kiki was so anxious that she was about to cry. The little girl held the mermaid's hand and said, How about we borrow a basin from Uncle and water you? Damn, you still need to water us? Do you think we are flowers and plants? We are clearly wild kittens, meow. Cough cough. Back to the topic. The mermaids didn't know if they should be moved or break out in a cold sweat. They quickly waved their hands and said, We don't need to water us. You just need to help us up and send us to the sea. But we are all children, Dejun said with a frown. He seemed to have thought a lot. You all eat so much. We can't help you. Even if she was a foreigner, as a girl, she still cared about her figure and weight, okay? What did he mean by eating so much? The mermaid who could understand Chinese was going crazy. She felt that her companions were too lucky. If they couldn't understand Chinese, they wouldn't have to be tortured by these children. How about we ask Uncle Photographer for help? Kiki suggested. No. The mermaid quickly waved her hand. If they asked the photographer for help, then what was the point of their task of testing the children? She forced a smile and said, "It won't be very heavy. We still have strength, but not that much. As long as you help us, we can stand up." Chapter 1455. Later, when Poplar Fruit watched the show, he wondered if he should criticize his daughter. She was too kind-hearted. When she heard others asking for help, she was anxious to help. She was too naive. She believed the lies others told to coax her. However, Poplar Fruit suddenly thought about it. Was it a good thing for a 4-year-old child to be on guard against the whole world? It was not difficult to distinguish between good and evil. As she grew up, she would naturally understand the dangers of the world and the complexity of people's hearts. It was easy to grow up, but difficult to maintain this innocence. At this age, she still maintained a pure and kind heart. At least for now, Poplar Fruit could still protect her, right? When she grew up, she would be able to distinguish between good and evil. He hoped that she could continue to be a kind person who treated others with sincerity. He hoped that she would not lose her precious character because of the unpredictable changes in the world. Such a choice might cause a lot of controversy, but who could be sure that they were doing the right thing? Poplar Fruit did not think that what he did would be good for Kiki, but he was willing to protect the little girl. Those problems would be left to the future Kiki to choose. When they returned to the show, Dejun, Kiki, and Xian found out that the three of them could still be of help. The children in this season lived in a family that was close to the entertainment industry. Although they had been watched by the whole country and even the whole world since they were young, they did not become impetuous because of it. Instead, they retained their golden hearts that were willing to help others. Dejun and Xian were taking care of the mermaid who understood Chinese, while Chi was taking care of the other mermaid. They were dragging and shoving each other. Their movements were not very careful, but they finally managed to help the two mermaids up. "Thank you very much." The mermaid gently patted Dejun's head. She knew that this child was most afraid of her. Of course, she would not take those so-called innocent words to heart. "What are you going to do next?" Dejun asked worriedly. Kiki also nodded. She sniffed and said, "We can't go home with you. Because my papa said that we can't go into the water, which means we can't get close to the sea. The sea is very dangerous." Now that their goal had been achieved, the mermaids did not intend to continue grabbing the camera. They smiled and said, "No need, we can go home here." However, it was clear that Dejun and the others were still unsatisfied. He asked curiously, "How are you going to get home? Is it swimming?" "I think so. They are all fish." Xian nodded. "They are not fish, they are mermaids." Dejun and Xian pretended to have an academic discussion. Kiki, who was standing at the side, was also in high spirits. She seemed to want to participate in the discussion as well. Dejun, Xian, Kiki. The mermaids were speechless. They wanted to leave quickly and change their clothes. They shouted twice to attract the attention of the children, and hurriedly said, "Now we need to go home. Can you turn around? Because we can't be seen when we swim in the sea." Kiki turned around obediently. Xian and Dejun also turned around together. However, they were still very curious. They were not old grandpas and grannies. They were still at the age of 100,000 Ys. Although the mermaids said that, Dejun could not help but move. Kiki and Xian could not help but turn their heads as well. As a result, they saw a scene that made them very puzzled. The two mermaids only had their feet in the water, but they were tiptoeing to the right instead of swimming towards their home. The depths of the sea. "What are you doing?" Kiki could not help but ask. "You guys continue to turn around." The mermaids were really defeated by the three little ones. They waved their hands. wanting to cry, but no tears came out. They continued to cover up this broken lie. Fortunately, in the end, it was Kiki who stood up to save this crossover drama that had already made the audience burst out laughing. She took Xian and Dejun's hands and turned them both around. Let's not watch. If we watch, they won't be able to swim home. Yes, they can't always live on land. Dejun agreed. Thus they stood like this with their backs to the sea, hand in hand, and stood there for a long, long time. Finally, Xian could not help but ask, Have they gone home? I don't know, Dejun said honestly. I want to turn around and see. Xian could not help but suggest. But if we watch, they won't be able to go home. Kiki said worriedly. Then how long do we have to wait? Xian said aggrievedly. I'm exhausted. Can we ask them when they'll be able to go home? Dejun suggested. Although he suggested it, he had no intention of carrying it out. In the end, after looking left and right, this heavy responsibility fell on Kiki's shoulders. The little girl did not turn around. She shouted in a clear voice, Sister Mermaid, have you gone home? Her voice was quickly drowned out by the sound of the waves, leaving only the whistling of the wind and the sound of the waves hitting the beach. Kiki finally could not hold back. She was the first to turn around, and then Xian and Dejun also turned around. However, they could no longer see the two mermaids. They are gone, Xian muttered. They couldn't have been eaten by a whale, right? Dejun wanted to show off his rich knowledge. Let me tell you, whales are the largest animals in the world. I know. Kiki finally understood at the last moment. She raised her hand happily and said, They must have swum home. But they didn't say goodbye. Kiki sighed regretfully. That was also a mistake on the part of the two mermaids. They had been confused by the three children's innocent words, and had almost been exposed. I think it's good that they can go home, Xian said. Yes, I think we've done a good thing. Kiki also became happy. She said happily, I'm going to tell my papa that we saved the mermaids today. We saved the mermaids. Dejun and Xian also became very excited. She saw the three energetic little ones running on the beach again. They chased after each other, and even ran a race. Childhood was really beautiful, wasn't it? Today they saved the mermaids, maybe they could save the world tomorrow. No matter what, it was time to go find their father. Chapter 1456. Yonggua's group, draped in tattered animal skins, carried bamboo poles upside down, and carried the fishy smell of the sea breeze as they returned to the camp from afar. Of course, such a cool formation didn't last long. Papa is back. Kiki, who was playing in front of the camp, immediately saw her father and the others and jumped up excitedly. Daddy! Daddy! The three little ones, who looked like three meatballs wrapped in animal skins from afar, cheered and rushed over from afar. All of a sudden, they threw themselves into the arms of their father, who opened his arms. Before Poplar Fruit and the others could enjoy the happiness of the reunion with a smile, Kiki and the others shouted that they wanted to jump out of their father's arms, and then rummage around for their clothes and packages. It was as if they were chicks waiting to be fed with their mouths wide open when their parents returned. Here. Poplar Fruit quickly opened the animal skin package in his hand, and the black things inside immediately wriggled. Wow! It's a lobster! It's a lobster! The little ones were shocked at first, and then they became very excited, especially Dajuan. He was no longer reserved, and he was jumping there as if he had been pinched by a lobster. His father, Lin Yongjian, was afraid that he would really be pinched, so he reached out to a safe distance and said, It's okay to look, but you can't reach out, okay? If you get pinched by its big pincers. He didn't need to say the seriousness of the situation. The children also thought of it. Looking at their cowering faces, they knew it. Then let's take a look. In the animal skin package, there were lobsters, 3 small lobsters, and some shells and crabs. What is this? Xian pointed curiously at the black balls of linen. This is kelp. Lin Yongjian said. It's edible. The kelp and pork bone soup you used to eat was cooked with this. Lin Yongjian caught the kelp, and he thought it could be used to cook soup. But Poplar Fruit didn't think it was that simple. Lin Yongjian turned around to borrow a pot from the staff. It seemed that they were going to cook in the wild. But he was rejected by the staff with a smile. No, it's the Stone Age now. There are no pots. No wok. Lin Yongjian was confused. He spread out his hands and asked, "How are we going to cook seafood without a pot?" Forget about the kelp. Without a pot, how are they going to eat seafood? Just now on the rocky beach, they were super excited because they caught a lot of seafood. That place was really a treasure. The fathers happily said that they wanted to go back and cook delicious food for the little ones. In the end, he wasn't even willing to lend her a pot. Zhou Shimin pulled Lin Yongjian and said, "It's okay, we can barbecue the lobster." That would be difficult. However, Poplar Fruit had an ominous premonition. He stepped out of the crowd and asked the staff, "Excuse me, can you lend us a lighter? Or matches?" The staff first shook his head, then shook it again. As expected. In the Stone Age there weren't even lighters or matches. Poplar Fruit felt that they were going to be miserable. At this moment, Zhou Shimin was thinking the same thing as Poplar Fruit. He rubbed his hands with a wry smile and asked the other party, "Don't tell me you want us to do this?" The staff member nodded. As expected. Just now, the caveman called Jose played with wood to make fire. This was not a performance. He was teaching them how to survive in the Stone Age. After a while, Poplar Fruit, Lin Yongjian, and Zhou Shimin gathered together and stared at the pile of wood and hay in the middle of them. They didn't know how to start. Even Poplar Fruit, who was born in the countryside, had never tried to make fire by drilling wood. Next to them, the three little ones in animal skins also gathered together, but they were watching the lobsters and crabs that were trying to climb out of the cage, made of animal skins. After all, Kiki was still a silly and bold little girl. She couldn't help but reach out her white and tender little hand because of her love for strange creatures. "No, be careful." Dejun hurriedly stopped her. He also intimidated Xian, who was about to make a move. "It'll hurt." He was timid. When he saw the crab's pincers and the lobster's bigger pincers, he didn't want to compete with them. "Then we'll use a small stick." Kiki had an idea. She found a small stick that had leaked out from her father's side. It was only a little thicker than a toothpick. She picked it up and gently poked the bubbling crab. "Kiki, be careful," Dejun said in a trembling voice, but his eyes were filled with envy and curiosity. He also wanted to take risks, but he still needed to take the last step. "Don't be afraid, they're very cute." Kiki touched the other lobster with its big pincers. In the end, the lobster clamped the stick, and before it had time to react, the stick was snapped in half. Kiki quickly retracted her little hand and looked at her little friends helplessly. Luckily, it didn't clamp Kiki's little hand. If her white and tender little fingers were clamped, how painful would it be? How pitiful would it be? Because at this moment, the children all saw how scary the big pincers were. The atmosphere seemed to be a little tense. "Let's not touch it," Dejun said weakly. Xian and Kiki nodded vigorously. "Don't touch it, it's so scary. What if you break your fingers?" But now there was another problem. The lobsters and crabs started to crawl around randomly. The animal skin cage couldn't hold them anymore. What if they ran away? They saw a lobster crawling towards Xian. Xian squatted there in a daze, as if he was starving. "Xian, be careful," Kiki couldn't help but say. She didn't dare to speak too loudly, as if she would attract the lobster if she spoke too loudly. On the other side, the fathers were in a daze for a while, but they had already started to rely on themselves. Didn't Grandpa Mao say that if you do it yourself, you'll have plenty to eat and wear? The young people in the program crew were unreliable, so they had to do it themselves. The principle of drilling wood to start a fire was very clear. It was to drill a hard wooden stick together with the wood, and use friction to start a fire. But doing it was far from as simple as it seemed. If the friction made the wood hot, then it had to be rubbed hard. If they used skateboard shoes to rub, and rub again, it would definitely be impossible to start a fire. So first Zhou Shimin, who was small and could easily squat down, rubbed the special wooden stick. Poplar Fruit and Lin Yongjian squatted next to him, mainly using their bodies. 1 minute, 2 minutes passed. Zhou Shimin's hands were almost broken, but he didn't see a single spark. A little sweat appeared on his forehead. As he rubbed, he turned to Poplar Fruit and said, "I can't do it anymore. Come and pick me up." "Wait a minute." Before Zhou Shimin could finish, Xian jumped up with a cry and threw herself into Zhou Shimin's arms. Zhou Shimin hurriedly let go of his hands and picked Xian up. Well, all his previous efforts were wasted. Chapter 1457. Yanghua stepped forward and caught the rampaging crab and a few lobsters that wanted to escape with their small feet. In exchange, the three little ones looked at her with adoration. "Uncle Poplar Fruit, why aren't you afraid that they will bite you?" Dejun asked curiously. "Because I have skills. I can catch them, and they can't bite me." Poplar Fruit laughed. He patted Dejun's shoulder and said, "But you can't do it now. You are too slow. Wait until you grow up before you learn." Dejun lowered his head regretfully. But soon the three little ones found a new target, drilling wood to start a fire. They were very curious. They each squatted beside their father and watched as Poplar Fruit, Zhou Shimin, and Lin Yongjian took turns rubbing the wooden stick. Of course, they couldn't stay still. Kiki moved around and even ran behind Poplar Fruit and climbed up his back. What's more, Xian's little head was getting closer and closer, blocking Poplar Fruit's view. There was no other way but to stop again. All their previous efforts were wasted. Hey you two, can you stop fooling around? And Xian, can you stop moving forward?" Poplar Fruit rubbed the heads of the two little ones and said, "What if there is a sudden fire, and your hair is all burned?" As he said that, Poplar Fruit made a scary gesture of an explosion. However, it was originally meant to scare them. In the end, Poplar Fruit's gesture made them laugh. Especially Kiki. The little girl was giggling nonstop, the kind that couldn't stop at all. "All of you go play on the side. We have to start the fire early so that you can have something to eat." Lin Yongjian began to clear the area. This time, the three little ones obediently went to play on the side, and Poplar Fruit and the other two finally got a moment of peace. "I think we should adjust a little," Poplar Fruit said. He used his hands to gather the wood chips and hay, and tried to get as close to the hole as possible. "First, slowly use your strength, then increase your strength. How about this? Teacher Lin, go first." Zhou Shimin handed the wooden stick to Lin Yongjian. Lin Yongjian nodded. "Yes, I'm slower." "Then me. Next, Poplar Fruit, follow," Zhou Shimin said. Poplar Fruit smiled and nodded. He even stood up and twisted his arms, ready to go all out. Lin Yongjian began to heat the temperature of the wood. Zhou Shimin quickly took over. He was even faster. He did not know how the wood was, but his hands were definitely red from rubbing the wood. Poplar Fruit. In order to increase her speed, Yanghua even changed into a kneeling position. As soon as she received the wooden stick, Yanghua fiercely began to rub it. Suddenly, his hands became a shadow to him. Immediately, there was a burnt smell. Almost there, almost there," Zhou Shimin shouted excitedly. Lin Yongjian was more pragmatic. He carefully lowered his body and gathered the grass and wood chips to the side of the wooden stick. He didn't know what was going on. Poplar Fruit only saw a few sparks bursting out, and then the nearby wood chips were rubbed against each other, igniting a small flame. Then, he ignited the hay beside him. "There's fire. It's a success," Zhou Shimin shouted excitedly. The three children who were playing in the sand heard him and rushed over to watch the commotion. Poplar Fruit, who heard the commotion, quickly turned his head and shouted, Don't. But it was too late. The three little guys didn't run very fast, but they were still carrying the wind and sand with them. Although they stopped in front, the wind and sand rushed towards them. Not to mention the fragile little flame, even Lin Yongjian was affected. "Where's the fire?" Kiki, who was in the lead, asked. She didn't even see her father's dark face. These three little fellows didn't even know that they had wasted their father's hard work. They had no choice but to chase the three children away, then clean up the sand they kicked over and start again. Fortunately, they were familiar with the process this time. After only one effort, they reignited the hay. Next, it was the part that Poplar Fruit was familiar with. After all, he was born in the countryside. Although he hadn't used firewood to cook for nearly 15 years, the family used natural gas when Poplar Fruit was in his teens. He wasn't out of practice. He had previously used the stones that the children helped to pick up to build a simple stove, and the inside was covered with dry wood. All of this was done by him. Although it looked simple, in fact there was a lot of knowledge behind the placement of the wood inside. The working people had solved the problem of ventilation and oxygen through practice. Poplar Fruit carefully placed the hay wrapped in the fire into the stove, and continued to use the hay beside him to cultivate the fire. Then he blew hard and gently. The fire burned brighter and brighter, and gradually, a larger piece of wood was ignited. At this time, they finally achieved the final result of drilling wood to make fire. "Papa, we're hungry." Kiki seemed to be unable to play at this time. She pulled her father's hand and shook it expectantly. Xianxian was even more unbearable. She threw herself into her father's arms and hummed like a little pig, as if she was calling for food. They had just received a reminder from the staff of the program not to eat the lobster. It would be used later, and the rest was up to them. Moreover, what was even worse was that they had to make up a reason not to eat the lobster. All right, since they promised that there would be lobsters later, and even better lobsters to eat, Yanghua and the others decided to forgive them. However, this fabricated reason couldn't be about protecting animals. Therefore, Poplar Fruit suggested that they roast crabs and scallops first. The scallops were easy to roast. They were placed on the stone slab and roasted for a while. When they opened their mouths, they were almost cooked. "Come on, have a taste." Poplar Fruit roasted several scallops in a row, one for each of the children. He also took one and fed it to Kiki. "Be careful, it's hot." Seeing his daughter chewing, Poplar Fruit asked with a smile, "Is it delicious?" Kiki nodded and said with a smile in her eyes, "It's delicious." Although it was not as delicious as the vermicelli scallops in the hotel, they were roasted by her father after all. Moreover, she was hungry, so she chewed with saliva. However, it was just a taste. They didn't catch many scallops. Poplar Fruit and the other adults didn't eat them. They left all the scallops to the children. Each of them ate 2 scallops. Xianxian didn't like seafood very much, so she only ate 1 scallop. What about the crab? When they pulled the poor crab out of the fire, they only saw a black piece of charcoal. It was overcooked. Poplar Fruit and Zhou Shimin sighed. They had no choice. They were so focused on eating the scallops that they forgot about the crab. Moreover, they were roasting it on the wood. "Let's forget about it. I don't think we should waste it." Zhou Shimin pushed the 3 trembling lobsters and found an excuse, saying, "It's bad. It's worth a few hundred yuan." What about the children who were waiting to be fed? A few scallops were not enough to fill the gaps between their teeth. Chapter 1458. "I'm hungry." Xianxian rubbed her round but empty stomach and said pitifully, "I'm a little hungry too." Kiki had only eaten 2 scallops, so of course she was hungry. Dajuan joined in the fun. "I'm starving to death." "Why do I feel that this episode is even worse than the last time you acted as a beggar?" Lin Yongjian laughed as he hugged his son, and hid in the tent with everyone else. "Acting as a beggar is pretty good," Zhou Shimin said lazily. Poplar Fruit was still quite spirited as he laughed. "That's because at that time, you acted as a beggar and got buns from Xianxian, but Teacher Lin didn't." "Buns, I want to eat buns. I want to eat buns. I want to eat buns." Hearing the words buns, Xianxian was the first to get excited. Kiki and Dajuan also began to clamor, as they shouted nonstop. Just now it looked like it was going to rain, so they hid in the tent and used the excuse of taking an afternoon nap to get over their hunger. However, it looked like they could no longer fool them. The adults could still endure it, but the children could not endure it. "No, we have to protest." Protest. Poplar Fruit and company jumped out of the tent and tried to reason with the program crew. "If you don't give us anything to eat, you should at least give the children something to eat, right? Although you said there were lobsters, distant water can't quench the present thirst." In the end, they managed to get a few packets of biscuits. The children were half full and Poplar Fruit and company also had something to fill their stomachs with. Of course, this segment would not be broadcasted on television. Only Poplar Fruit and company, who were actually recording the program, knew the hardships behind the glamour of recording the program. In the afternoon, the village chief finally appeared again. Lu Yi and company, who were halfway up the mountain, also came down. The two teams gathered together and asked each other. They realized that they were all hungry. The feeling of returning to the Stone Age and meeting fellow townsmen immediately made them tear up as they hugged each other and cried. The village chief said a lot again. However, there were only two main points. Do you want to eat? Yes, good. Then let's have a competition. The two teams competed. Every competition had different rewards. For example, the first winning team would get a box of matches. Even though Lu Yi, Poplar Fruit, and the others had successfully started a fire, none of them wanted to use their hands to rub the wooden stick again. After being tormented for so long in the afternoon, even Poplar Fruit, who had thick skin and thick flesh, had blisters on his palms. It was only after Kiki helped to blow on his palms that they recovered. However, the first competition was to bury people on the beach. Moreover, he was burying his own child. The competition was considered fair. Although Poplar Fruit had 3 adults, they still had to bury 3 people. Quick, quick. Lie down first. Poplar Fruit urged in a low voice. The little girl immediately lay down obediently. She really didn't have the restraint that a girl should have. She wasn't afraid that her hair would be mixed with sand. Moreover, Kiki was very smart. Before the village chief even shouted to start, she had already put sand on her body. Poplar Fruit didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He lowered his head and said, "Be careful, don't get sand in your eyes. It's best if you close your eyes." Kiki closed her eyes, but her face was full of smiles. Even her mouth couldn't help but open. She felt that this game was very fun. However, it was a pity. Poplar Fruit and the others had lost the first game. This was because they had to bury 3 children. Although it sounded a little scary, it was much more work than Lu Yi and the others who only needed to bury 2 children. Therefore, the first prize, the matches, went to Lu Yi and the others. Zhou Shimin clapped his hands and encouraged everyone. He smiled and said, "It's all right. Without the matches, we can still drill wood to start a fire. Let's try to win the next game." The prize for the second competition was a pot. A pot. Lin Yongjian's eyes immediately turned red. He wanted to cry but had no tears. In the afternoon, wasn't it just a pot that they had begged for? With the pot, the crab would not be roasted into charcoal. With the pot, they could cook seaweed soup for the children. With the pot, they could even cook the lobster. It was all because of this darn pot. Lin Yongjian, Poplar Fruit, and Zhou Shimin rubbed their palms together. It was as if they were determined to win the prize. However, Lu Yi and the others also wanted the pot. This was because with the pot, they could cook anything they wanted to eat. Without the pot, they could only cook barbecue. The first game was to bury, while the second game was to dig. The village chief had hidden the pot on the beach beneath their feet. If the team managed to dig it up, then the pot would belong to them. Oh. Lin Yongjian took the lead. Poplar Fruit and the others clapped. The meaning was obvious. They had a huge advantage in this game. This was because they had 3 people, while Lu Yi and the others only had 2. Hu Jun smiled and said, "That might not be the case. In this game, there is still a huge element of luck." Without further ado, they began digging. Everyone quickly moved. However, the beach was quite big. Even if they circled it, it was enough for 10 to 20 people to search. After searching for a while, everyone began to feel frustrated. They could not dig it up at all. Lu Yi still used his hands as rods to explore the path. He inserted them into the sand and changed to another spot when he did not feel anything. Kiki was working very hard to help her father dig. The little girl's hair had been mixed with sand and was being rubbed and shaken by her father. Now it was a mess. But this kind of mess, coupled with the animal skin clothes on her body, looked a kind of wild beauty. Or it could be said that wild and pure coexisted. Don't forget that the little girl's face was still so exquisite and charming. However, Poplar Fruit did not have time to care. Even the camera only gave Kiki a few shots. This was because Lu Yi had a new discovery. The most unlikely place was the most likely place. Lu Yi suddenly raised his head and looked at the village chief who was sitting by the side watching the commotion. It seemed like the village chief had not moved for a long time. According to Lu Ye's many years of experience as a variety star, bullshit. There was definitely a problem with the village chief. Lu Yi pounced on the village chief and pushed him aside without any explanation. Then he began digging at the beach where the village chief was sitting. I don't have it here. The village chief smiled helplessly. However, his smile, to Lu Yi, was more like a cover-up for his panic after being exposed. It's definitely with you. Get up. Lu Yi smiled. The two's quarrel attracted a flock of vultures. Lin Yongjian, Zhou Shimin and Hu Jun all went up. That's right. No one was stupid. They felt that it was definitely there. If not, why would the village chief struggle? Even Kiki heard the commotion and followed. However, Poplar Fruit did not. He did not join in the commotion. This was because there were already a lot of people there. It was like a group of dogs fighting for a bone. With Lin Yongjian and Zhou Shimin around, he did not want to go up. Why not stay and continue searching for treasure on the beach? Wait, what is this? Chapter 1459. After messing around for so long, the big pot that the village chief was talking about was not under his butt, but really buried in the beach. Lu Yi sighed and patted his head. He had also tested the place where Poplar Fruit had found the pot. Unfortunately, he did not have much patience. Now, it seemed that digging under the village chief's butt was a smart move. However, Lin Yongjian and Zhou Shimin were overjoyed and shouted, "With the pot, we can cook lobsters to eat." Xian was dancing at the side. He was smiling so much that his little eyes disappeared. Lobster, lobster, lobster. He did not like eating seafood, but that did not mean that he did not know how to eat it. When he was hungry, anything was delicious. Chi-Chi giggled and got up from the ground. She ran to her father's back and climbed up using her hands and feet. She hooked her hands around her father's neck and said with a smile, "Papa, you're too awesome." However, Nui waddled over. The little boy frowned and asked, But we don't have a pot. What do we do?" "It's okay, brother Nui. You can come to our house to eat." Kiki poked her head out from behind her father and invited. Poplar Fruit also smiled and nodded. "Yes, Nui. You can come over. You have matches to start a fire, and we have a pot. And lobsters," Lin Yongjian added with a smile. At this moment, the village chief stood up. In the following competition, the food would be decided, even though the two teams had already decided to team up. If that team wins, then our elder Jose will bring you to catch lobsters, the real lobster's habitat, and the real big lobsters, the village chief said. Suddenly, the atmosphere became lively. Regardless of whether they would share the food together in the end, it seemed that it was worth it to put in some effort in exchange for a sumptuous lobster feast. Why did he say put in effort? Because the last competition was a tug-of-war, a competition between the fathers. However, from the looks of it, the number of people on Lu Ye's side and Poplar Fruit's side was not balanced. Therefore, the village chief allowed Lu Yi and the others to choose one person to join their team. While saying this, the village chief kept hiding his hands and waving them fiercely, meaning, "Don't choose me, don't choose me." There were two very popular extras in the show. One was the village chief, and the other was producer Xia. The two of them were amiable and loved by the children. More importantly, it was easy to invite them. If there was a shortage of people, they would be approved. However, they couldn't possibly hire the skinny producer Xia for something as physical as a tug-of-war, right? Lu Yi and company's eyes darted around, but their eyes landed on the bulky Elder Joss. They used the Poplar Fruit as a translator to get Elder Joss to come over and help with the tug-of-war. Poplar Fruit also showed off his simultaneous interpretation. Of course, this was just a small interlude. Translation is still the best. Lu Yi chuckled and said to Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit rolled his eyes and said, "I'm losing money. I've pulled in some strong reinforcements for you." Wasn't that right? Joss was a bulky Caucasian. Among them, even the bulkiest Hu Jun's arms were smaller than his. Looking at his average height of 1.8 meters and above, on Poplar Fruit's side, other than Poplar Fruit's outstanding performance, the 6-meter Zhou Shimin and the frail Lin Yongjian did not seem to have any competition. It was no wonder Lu Yi was smiling so proudly. However, they seemed to have forgotten about the freak poplar fruit. The competition began. In the eyes of the audience and in the eyes of Lu Yi and company, there was a clear contrast between the strong and the weak. Yet from the beginning, the competition was in a stalemate. Actually, even Zhou Shimin, who was standing in the first place, had a drastic change in expression when the whistle sounded. He felt an irresistible force coming from the opposite side of the rope. Lu Yi, Hujun, and Elder Joss. The combined strength of the three of them was no joke. But just as Zhou Shimin felt that they were going to be in for a tragedy, the rope he was holding became as stable as Mount Tai. He did not get pulled down by the rope. Instead, he felt a sense of security from having someone backing him up. Of course, Poplar Fruit was backing them up. Poplar Fruit, who was standing at the back, showed his strength. Although standing at the back was the hardest to exert his strength, Poplar Fruit's strength was not something that could be measured by his body size. In places where the camera could not capture, he did not use his qi gene. Instead, his muscles swelled up by themselves, causing the animal hide to tighten. Then he easily neutralized the waves of force that his opponents were pulling at him. What was going on? Lu Yi and company were surprised. At this moment, he did not care if Joss could understand his English. He shouted, "Come on, come on!" Joss also felt embarrassed and tried his best to exert his strength. However, he felt that the strength he exerted was like a clay ox entering the sea. There was no response. "It feels like we're pulling a huge rock," Hujun thought in surprise. However, to the onlookers, this was still a close match. Especially the children. They were anxious and wanted to help. However, the village chief hurriedly stopped them. This was because this had been scolded by netizens on the internet before. On one hand, it was unfair. Children should not be allowed to have the concept of unfair competition from a young age. On the other hand, it was unsafe. What if the adults used too much force and their elbows hit the children? Or if they lost their balance and fell on their buttocks? Seeing how excited the children were, Poplar Fruit did not intend to continue playing. He was hiding his strength. Anyway, his opponents were starting to get tired. As long as he put in a little more effort. From the camera's perspective, Poplar Fruit and Zhou Shimin, these two guys with good physical fitness, seemed to be getting braver as they fought. Taking advantage of the fact that their opponents were getting tired, they broke the balance in one go and pulled each other along. Like a string of gourds, they pulled Lu Yi and company down. Yay! We won! Dejun cheered and hugged Kiki and Xian Xian. Actually, winning was winning. However, even if they had reversed a match that everyone thought they would lose, there was nothing to be excited about. This was because the village chief, in the end, still brought the five fathers away, and let Elder Joss lead them to look for their lobster feast. Luckily, the program team did not go to the extent of angering the heavens and people. They still prepared a not-so-sumptuous lunch for the fathers and children. After eating, they would have the strength to go hunting. Of course, the ones who went hunting were still the fathers. Just like the primitive people of the Stone Age, the children stayed behind. As for Kiki, Kong Kong and the rest, they were led by the village chief and another group of staff from the program team to play an adventure game. What kind of sparks would be created here? Chapter 1460. Poplar Fruit and the other four dads followed Elder Joss to look for lobsters. However, this time they were not at the rocky beach filled with cracks in the rocks. Instead, they came to a clear stream. This place seemed to be a natural lobster farm. Walking in the stream, through the sparkling water surface, they could see big and thick lobsters blowing bubbles. Catching lobsters here was really a blissful experience. It seemed that they were used to their comfortable lives and were not as agile as the ones in the cracks in the rocks. Poplar Fruit and the rest bent down and gently scooped up a lobster. I never thought that catching seafood was so easy. Lin Yongjian chuckled. This laughter had never stopped in the air above the stream. Everyone returned with a full load. Not only did they get enough lobsters, Poplar Fruit and the rest even got some extra lobsters for the staff to bring back to the hotel, so that the group of mothers could enjoy a lobster feast. The camera returned to the base. Under the lead of the village chief, Kiki and the rest climbed up the steep, stairless hill to explore the mountain. The experienced Kong Kong and Nuoi took the lead. The two children, especially Nuoi, nagged along the way like Tang Sanzang. Of course, he was talking about the things to take note of. It was also a display of his strong sense of responsibility as an elder brother. The children's mission was to find treasure. The village chief did not tell them what treasure to look for. Anyway, the treasure was hidden on the hill. Whoever found it would own the treasure. Although this mission was brainless, and if Lu Yi and the rest heard it, they would definitely not let go of this opportunity to mock them. The children were too easy to coax. The moment they heard that there was treasure, their eyes lit up like lanterns. Let's go. Let's go find the treasure. The children scattered in all directions. However, as Xian was still in a daze, he fell behind. Kiki saw him and came back to give him a hand. However, if the entire hill was described as a football field, then the children were like footballs. Even if they kicked and ran, it would take a long time to finish the entire field. These little ones still had to walk with their short legs to search for the treasure. Kiki took Xian to search for the treasure. However, they were always busy on the road of treasure hunting. After a while, Kiki and Xian separated. However, the two children were not that bold. They chose the main road to look for it, but they could not find it even after searching for a long time. The little girl used her small hands to tidy up her long hair, while looking up at a big tree beside her. But how could she be hiding on a big tree? The production team was not so infuriated. They hid it in a big tree and the children would not be able to reach it. I can't find it. The little girl turned her head and made a face. He didn't know if she was depressed or happy. Anyway, she was very cute. At this moment, Kong Kong floated past her with a cool expression. He seemed to be talking to Kiki, but also seemed to be talking to himself. I think it should be hidden in the bushes. Bing. Kiki seemed to have been awakened all of a sudden. Yes. I'll go look for it too. Kiki jumped up happily. She realized that she had missed a lot of bushes. The little girl was full of energy. Her bright smile warmed people's hearts. In terms of luck when it came to finding things, it seemed that Kiki was the same as her father. They were very lucky. The little girl searched for another 5 minutes. Finally, in a bush, she found the treasure she had been looking for half an hour. It's here. Kiki shouted happily. Not far away, Xian heard the sound. He was also excited. He followed the sound in the bushes, but it seemed that he was lost. Is that an egg? The bushes were only as high as Kiki's shoulders, so Kiki could only tiptoe to look inside. However, she could not see clearly. The cameraman nodded. However, Kiki was not satisfied. She waved her hand and asked the cameraman to turn the camera's viewfinder around. Then she looked up and through the viewfinder and the cameraman, she saw the egg in the bushes. After a few months of getting along with the little girl, as well as the experience of holding a camera from time to time as a small director, she also had a rough understanding of big things like cameras. Looking at her skillful movement of pointing at the viewfinder, one could tell that she was extraordinarily intelligent. Moreover, she was quite witty. From the viewfinder, the egg was very big. It was a little smaller than an ostrich egg. The color was dark, and there was a faint navy blue color. There was no trace of texture. It looked like a natural gem. It's really beautiful. Kiki liked it immediately. She looked at the bushes in front of her and asked hesitantly, "How can I get it?" In fact, it was difficult to see the situation clearly. The little girl was not tall enough. She could not see, but there was a gap in the bushes that she could walk through. Kiki happened to be standing on the thickest side of the bushes. Fortunately, she had a cameraman uncle who liked her very much. When Xian finally found the bushes, he saw that the bushes were empty. He was one step slower. The treasure had been taken by Kiki. At that time, Chi-Chi didn't have the mentality to take the treasure for herself. She carefully picked up the egg and cradled it in her arms as if she was protecting a newborn baby. Brother Kong Kong, Brother Nuai. Kiki came out from the bushes. She saw her friends and shouted. Her voice was full of joy and happiness. Look, I found it. What is it? Kong Kong and Nuai surrounded her. It's a bird egg. Kiki happily showed it to them. Nuai opened his mouth exaggeratedly and smiled. Wow, Kiki, you're amazing. Kong Kong looked at it for a while and patted Kiki's shoulder seriously. Kiki, you have to protect it well. If you don't break it, you'll be sad again. Kong Kong had seen the past live broadcast on TV. He knew the story that had not happened to him like the back of his hand. These words immediately reminded Chi-Chi of that heart-wrenching experience. Although Nui comforted her, and later Mama Ma comforted her, Kiki did not want to feel the pain and guilt again. The little girl hesitated. She hugged the egg and looked left and right. She walked over to the village chief and held out the egg. Village chief, this is for you. Can you return it to its Mama Ma? She seemed to be afraid. She did not want to take on this heavy responsibility. If she failed, it would mean the loss of a life. The village chief waved his hand and did not want to take the egg. He said, Kiki, since you found it, it means that you have fate with it. Before your father comes back, you have to protect it well. Chapter 1461. Perhaps, when the production team designed this game, they did not think about the conflicts that would occur later on. They only wanted to show the children's mutual aid and friendship. But the idea was beautiful, but the plan could not keep up with the changes. Kiki was given a heavy responsibility by the village chief, so she could only hug the bird egg in her arms. Even though Nuoyi's side was bustling with activity, she still stood far away, not daring to go forward. She was afraid that she would break the egg again if she joined in the fun. There's a big bug here. Look, I found a big bug. Nuoyi's surprised shout was heard. Kong Kong and Dejun, who were wandering around in boredom, immediately ran over. They went over and took a look. The two boys immediately retreated 2 steps in shock. The knowledgeable Dejun said, Nui, you're wrong. This is not a big bug, it's a lizard. I've seen it in the pet shop before. Kong Kong nodded and said, but this was only found in the wild, so it should be a wild lizard. The two of them were typical armchair strategists. They stood a meter away and looked like they were trembling, but they spoke as if they knew a lot. Xian Xian finally walked out from the bushes, but was once again separated by the lizard. Little fatty Xian was a little dazed today, but he did not forget his fear of reptiles. No, I don't want. Xian Xian retreated in fear. Don't be afraid, Xian Xian, it won't eat you. Big brother Kong Kong quickly went forward to comfort him. Little did he know that his comfort only made Xian Xian feel even more afraid. It could even eat people? Kiki stood far away, so she could see very clearly. However, the little girl was not afraid. She was a daring person, and liked to make friends with any animal she had never seen before. Perhaps if there was a tiger in front of her, Kiki would not be afraid. Of course, a tiger might not hurt Kiki. The little girl had a natural affinity with animals. But now Kiki did not go forward. She hugged the bird egg and watched from afar. The responsibility of protecting the bird egg suppressed the little girl's curious nature. On the lizard's side, Nui had become another daredevil other than Kiki. He smiled sweetly as he circled to the back of the lizard, squatted down and grabbed it with both hands. He even grabbed it like he was grabbing a watermelon. Perhaps it was because he had been kicked twice by the struggling lizard. Nui felt a little scared. He put the lizard down again. This time, the lizard was no longer slow. Instead, it ran into the forest at a very fast speed. Xian Xian was freed. Only then did he see the egg in Kiki's arms. For a moment, little fatty Xian fell into a state of confusion. This bird's egg should be mine. Xian Xian thought blankly. If he had rushed over earlier and not gotten lost in the tall grass, then he would have found the treasure and the egg would have belonged to him. The reason why Xian Xian thought so was because in his eyes, this bird's egg was very, very beautiful. Seeing Xian Xian looking at it, Kiki kindly introduced it to Xian Xian. The village chief said that this is the egg of a bird called the emu. Its mama looks like an ostrich. In fact, the emu was also known as the Australian ostrich. I saw it in the bushes over there. Kiki said. That's right, Xian Xian also missed the treasure there. What a beautiful emerald. Xian Xian's eyes were filled with desire. It was not envy, but a desire to take it for himself. This gaze made Kiki feel a little scared, but she did not want to believe her own instincts. She even took the initiative to ask, Xian Xian, do you want to touch it? But at this moment, Nuyi and the rest ran over and said, you can't touch it. Kiki, you have to protect it. Needless to say, this bird's egg was very heavy, just like the responsibility Kiki was shouldering now. Her expression quickly became serious, and she wrapped her arms around the egg and hugged it in her arms. At this moment, Xian Xian's rationality was gradually being suppressed by the love in his heart. He tried to reach out and touch it, but Kiki dodged and said, Xian Xian, you can't. The little girl was a little scared, and she quickly left with the egg. But Xian Xian did not give up. He waited for Kiki to sit down on the big bed in Nuyi's camp, then ran over, looked for a while, and reached out to snatch it. Kiki was stunned. The cameraman and scriptwriter were also stunned. This was a plot they had never thought of. The conflict between the children had erupted so quickly. And how could it happen to the two children, Kiki and Xian Xian? They could not figure it out. But it was useless even if they could not figure it out. Xian Xian's snatching had already happened. No. Kiki struggled agitatedly. In terms of strength, Xian Xian could not be compared to Kiki. If Kiki was not willing to give it to him, how could Xian Xian snatch the bird's egg from Kiki's arms? But Kiki was worried that the fight between the two of them would break the bird's egg. The heavy responsibility made the little girl's agitation turn into rationality. Kiki let go of her hand, allowing Xian Xian to snatch the bird's egg away. But the grievance in the little girl's heart was like the sound of the waves, wave after wave, flooding Kiki's eyes in an instant. Woo-woo. Kiki ran away aggrievedly, rubbing her eyes with both hands, wiping away her tears. Her crying made one's heart ache. The audience in front of the TV was almost infected by the little girl's pouting mouth and all sorts of emotional expressions. Little chubby Xian's value instantly rose. This unforeseen event happened too suddenly. The little friends who were playing at the side had only just reacted and hurriedly ran over. Of course, Nui first ran to comfort his good friend Kiki, while Dejun and Kong Kong looked at Dejun and scratched their heads. Kiki's crying, and the condemning eyes of his friends, made Xian Xian feel that he was in the wrong. However, Xian Xian was still too young. He was only a little over 4 years old. His lunar birthday was in the middle of August. He had not reached the age to reflect on his mistakes. On the contrary, the guilt made Xian Xian's stubborn personality, making him even more unwilling to accept his mistakes. Xian Xian, you can't snatch Kiki's egg. She was the one who discovered it. You should return it to her. Dejun's words made Kiki's crying stop for a moment. She was still willing to believe in her good friend. But Xian Xian's stubbornness was there. He only snorted, imitated Kiki and hugged the bird's egg with both hands, stood up and walked in the other direction. As if her faith had collapsed, Chi-Chi cried even more miserably with a wah. Nuoi hugged her, but couldn't coax her. This was even a friendship crisis. The program crew's directors were all startled awake. They hesitated, wondering if they should intervene. Could it be that this was the last journey, and they still wanted to make the program have a sad ending? Chapter 1462. Xian Xian snatched the treasure that Kiki found. Although it was a bird's egg, his action of making a girl cry caused a lot of discussion among the netizens. Some netizens even scolded Xian Xian angrily. But in reality, they were all children. There was no need to be so uptight. Back at the scene, Kong Kong and Dejun persuaded Xian Xian to return the bird's egg to Kiki. Dejun scratched his head. He was helpless against Xian Xian's stubbornness. But luckily there was Kong Kong. He was smart. He blinked and said to Xian Xian, Xian Xian, didn't you say before that you liked Kiki? Now you've made her cry again. She might not like to play with you in the future. Kong Kang's words were like a bell in Xian Xian's heart. He realized that he had made a big mistake, but he was still hesitating. Yes, you should return it to Kiki. Dejun nodded and said, we're good friends. You can't steal our things. Kong Kong was like an old mother. She said earnestly, we should share. There was a problem with the logic, but Xian Xian gradually understood. He turned around and looked at Chi-Chi, who was crying so hard that her face had turned red. His sister looked very sad because he was the one who hurt her heart. Guilt replaced the joy he felt from taking the bird's egg. Xian moved. He pouted and walked towards Kiki. Kiki's sadness was not only because the bird's egg was stolen. More importantly, it was because her trusted friend did it. She couldn't understand. She was very sad. Since young, Kiki rarely had the experience of snatching toys from her friends. Xian walked over. Of course, he didn't apologize. It wasn't that he didn't want to apologize, but he didn't know how to say it. He was too young. The apology was stuck in his throat. It was hard to say. He raised his hands and handed the bird's egg to Kiki. He even placed it in her arms. Of course, little Fatty Xian's expression was very complicated. There was reluctance, regret and guilt. The adults in the production team had wanted to intervene, but since the situation had taken a turn for the better, they stopped and wanted to see how the children would deal with such a situation on their own. What would Kiki do if Xian returned the egg? Should he turn his head and leave, or should he awkwardly accept it with a knot in his heart that would destroy their friendship? Regardless of the choice, the audience was mentally prepared because what Xian had done before was indeed too much. They had already thought of a line to defend Kiki. If it were an adult like me, I would have made the same choice. However, adults were adults after all. The innocence of children was something they could never imagine. Chi was stunned for a moment before she lowered her head to look at the egg in her arms. After a while, she finally took it. She carefully held it close to her chest with one hand, while the other hand reached out. The little girl smiled through her tears. Her smile was very bright and not forced at all. She reached out and pulled Xian into her arms. Of course, there was still a fuse in the middle. The egg. This scene was very difficult to understand logically. Why did Kiki not pursue the matter? Why did she smile and give Xian a hug? Sister Kiki, I am sorry. Xian's hanging heart relaxed a little. He finally said the apology that he had suppressed in his heart. It's okay. I've already forgiven you. Kiki's face was still covered in tears and her voice was still a little sobbing. However, she was smiling happily. Perhaps, this didn't need any logic to explain. Between children, gratitude and grudges were just clouds in the past. Even if it wasn't resolved now, it would probably disappear in a night. Chi had merely resolved this conflict even faster than before. It had to be said that sometimes, a smile could resolve conflicts better than coldness. It could unite people's hearts. Seeing Kiki and Xian hugging each other like brothers, Nuai, Kong and Dejun also cheered and hugged them in the middle. Aya, don't squeeze anymore. Kiki giggled in the middle. If you squeeze again, the egg will break. The little girl still didn't know what the meaning of this sentence was. In any case, she made the audience in front of the TV laugh. Hearing Kiki's cry, Kong and the others let go of their hands. Then the four boys, including Xian, under Kong Kang's command, held hands and formed a large circle, surrounding Kiki in the middle. We have to protect Kiki and the egg. Kong said righteously to the camera. You can't come close. Xian finally stopped being confused. The boy with curly hair also said in a childish voice. You can't come close. Kiki was in the middle. She giggled and used animal skin to wipe away the tear stain. She smiled and said, You don't have to be like this. I feel that Kiki, you are very much like a princess now. Noi laughed. We are your knights. Really? Hee. The little girl was so happy that even her eyebrows seemed to be smiling. This was quite good. She was laughing without a care in the world. Good friends should be like this. If you did something wrong, you should change and be brave enough to apologize. More importantly, you should face each other with a tolerant heart and smile at each other. They laughed like this until the fathers came back. Even at the bonfire dinner by the seaside, they ate cooked lobsters. Everyone was happy and harmonious. They didn't know that the children had a friendship crisis in the mountains. If you didn't tell me, I wouldn't know. In front of a screen, Poplar Fruit laughed while being interviewed. I just watched the video and understood the cause and effect of this matter. In fact, Poplar Fruit was quite surprised and happy with his daughter's performance. After a pause, Poplar Fruit spread his hands and said with some emotion, Everyone has seen it. Sometimes material things and treasures are really not important. What is important is the feelings between us. Poplar Fruit said sincerely. Xianxian might have done something wrong in the beginning. At the beginning, Kiki shouldn't have avoided letting Xianxian see the egg. Poplar Fruit laughed. His laugh was quite relaxed. We should allow children to make mistakes and have a more tolerant attitude. The question is whether they can learn from their mistakes. Xianxian will be a good child. Poplar Fruit gave a thumbs up. He wouldn't pursue the matter. He did it. He was able to put down his pride and apologize. This is very rare. Sometimes, we adults can't be as brave as him to admit our mistakes. I believe that he is great now, and he will be great in the future. The debate should stop for a while. How can there be no twists and turns in the path of growth? We should be glad that the children are developing in a good direction. Furthermore, their friendship would become even stronger after going through so many twists and turns. Chapter 1463. When the fathers returned, it was already close to evening. Everyone was busy cooking lobsters while enjoying the unique sunset scenery on the coast. Eating lobsters, singing, chatting, and playing by the campfire. A few hours passed in the blink of an eye. The little ones were all sleepy. Both father and son pairs extinguished the campfire and returned to their own campsites to rest. The depressing thing was that although they had come to the beautiful Western Australia, they were tormented by the production team to the point that they could only sleep in a tattered tent by the beach. Of course, if it were not for taking care of the children, Poplar Fruit would think that such a wild life was actually very fun. He was not a professional backpacker, but the carefree attitude of backpackers made him quite envious. This could be seen from the fact that he had dared to drive around 6 provinces with his daughter and good friends in a car in the past. However, as he grew older and had a family, Poplar Fruit had become much more mature. Now what he did was more to protect and not to pursue excitement. Therefore, Poplar Fruit woke up in the middle of the night. After covering Kiki with a blanket, he went to patrol the beach outside. Although the production team said that it was fine, what if the tide really rose? Luckily, the night was peaceful. When they woke up the next day, a new day of challenges and adventures began. However, the village chief's words left his father and children dumbfounded. The team that loses the competition will choose a family to stay on this beach. It was like a bolt from the blue. The winning team could go to the beautiful Margaret Town to experience modern life, while the losing team had to stay and continue to be primitive people. Oh God, we have had enough of being primitive people. Although there was a saying about being vigilant in times of peace, being a primitive person for one day was an experience, and being a primitive person for the next day was torture. If they wanted to be a primitive person special, why did they come all the way to Australia? They could have gone to any beach or mountain in China to experience it. They could not complain, but the competition still had to go on. The competition this time was different from yesterday's. It was a game that Poplar Fruit had seen in a Korean variety show before. Each team would pick a clam and roast it with fire to make it open its mouth. Whoever was the fastest would win. In this way, Poplar Fruit's team's advantage in numbers was gone. The only thing left to compete was their luck and their so-called skills. Start a fire first and use dry grass to ignite the branches. This was only the preparatory stage. After the village chief gave the order, the 2 teams rushed forward and chose their own clams. Zhou Shimin was the one who picked the clams. Poplar Fruit was responsible for starting the fire. Lin Yongjian used his eyes to urge the clams to open their mouths. However, no matter how much he shouted, the clam opened its mouth a few seconds later than Lu Yi and the rest. The late excitement turned into disappointment. Misfortune fell upon Poplar Fruit's team. Who would want to stay behind and endure the desolate beach and the lonely ancient times? Obviously, even the most enthusiastic Poplar Fruit and Zhou Shimin were not willing. Even if they were willing to stay, they were sacrificing the children's wishes. Didn't they see that Kiki, Xianxian, and Dejun all had red eyes and were unwilling to be abandoned on this beach? How about this? We'll all stay behind. We won't go to town. Hu Jun was the oldest and was not afraid of going against the program team. He waved his hand and said. Lu Yi also said very loyally, "Yes, we'll go together if we want to go. If we want to stay, we'll stay together." If someone has to stay, we'd rather not go anywhere. Lu Ye's speech was more inspiring than Hu Jun's words. It also made the fathers and children determined to fight against the program team's tyranny. All right. The village chief clapped his hands and said with a smile, "Since everyone is so united then," he deliberately dragged his voice to make everyone anxious and wait for judgment. He smiled and said, "As a reward, we announce that everyone can enter the city." Really? Wow. That's great. Ha ha ha. Suddenly, the scene became a sea of cheers. Poplar Fruit also let out a big sigh of relief. He smiled and carried Kiki up, his face full of joy and joy. If the village chief insisted, he might have held Kiki's little hand and let her take the initiative to take on the difficult task of staying behind. However, in reality, the village chief insisted on letting the father and son stay behind. It made people feel that it was not humane. A parent-child program did not need to be as cruel as an adult reality show. It should be more humane and designed to be more heartwarming. Zhou Shimin and Xianxian stayed behind because they wanted to stay. Xiaohan did not see the need for them to stay. Since they could enter the city, then the mission was given to them. Let's talk about the children's mission first. The two boys, Kong Kong and Xianxian, went to the supermarket to buy groceries, while Dejun brought Kiki and Xianxian to buy delicious food. Every team had $100. $100 was about the value of 450 renminbi. It could still buy quite a lot of things. However, the village chief did not specify what to buy. Therefore, the fathers had to write it down on the mission cards for the children. According to the mission requirements, Kong Kong's team had to buy the ingredients for everyone's lunch, so they had to write it down in detail. It's okay. The ingredients in Australia are cheaper. Write more, Lu Yi said. He had been there before. Leave some for them to express themselves freely, Hu Jun suggested. Poplar Fruit's team was even more excessive. Dejun's team asked to buy snacks for everyone. Therefore, Lin Yongjian, who did not know much about snacks, did not have any ideas. Dejun, you have to follow Kiki. Listen to her arrangements. Lin Yongjian said. Family members knew family matters. Dejun didn't even know how to introduce himself in English, and he wasn't a very extroverted child. But you're the older brother. You have to protect your younger siblings, understand? Poplar Fruit also patted his daughter's shoulder and smiled. Okay, it's your turn to be the team leader today. Dejun and Xianxian don't speak English. You have to translate for them, okay? The little girl nodded obediently. She waved the mission card in her hand and asked doubtfully, "Then what do we have to buy?" It said snacks, but there were many kinds of snacks. Candy biscuits. Poplar Fruit said, "You can buy whatever you like. You can also help Xianxian and Dejun buy what they want to eat. But you only have $100. The little girl's eyes suddenly lit up. She swallowed and said happily, "Candy, I want to buy candy." You can't just buy candy. You have to buy something that everyone likes to eat. Poplar Fruit smiled and pinched the little girl's nose. And you can't eat it all on the road. You have to bring it back and share it with everyone. $100 was a little too much. Poplar Fruit said, "If you have more money, you can find Kong Kong and the others and ask them what they want to eat." Chapter 1464. The production team's bus brought the 10 primitive people to Margaret River Town. Before getting off the bus, Lu Yi helplessly asked, "Don't we need to change out of these clothes?" The answer was no. It looked like the little rascals were going to appear in this extremely modern Western Australian town in strange clothes. Hopefully they would not be surrounded. Although these were the clothes of the local Aborigines, it was likely that no one would appear so openly on the streets now. "You guys go ahead." Poplar Fruit reminded his daughter of some things to take note of. Then he smiled and patted the little girl's butt. He said, "Enjoy your mission. Have fun." Kiki happily smiled and said, "Yes, yes." She was not worried about leaving her father's side and following her friends to do missions. In the end, she would still return to her father's side. However, Kiki did not understand her father's meaning. Now this was no longer a mission. Instead, it was for her to enjoy the process. Poplar Fruit was smiling. He also missed the various torments that he had encountered in these 8 trips, especially when he saw the little rascals grow up. Perhaps the journey will still end. Then it will end now. Kiki, cherish every moment that you have now. The fathers left in the bus while the children began to rush to their respective positions under the guidance of the director and cameraman. Let's not talk about Kong Kong and Nuai who went straight to the supermarket for now. Kiki brought Dejun and Dejun. The 3 primitive people were wearing animal skin clothes. Each of them had a small bag slung over their shoulders. Kiki, where are we going? Dejun asked. There were too many colorful shops around. They had a Western lifestyle that was completely different from the ones in China. The little boy was almost dazzled by it all. As for Xianxian, he had fallen into a confused state again. It was probably because the environment was too unfamiliar, and the impact of culture that little chubby Xian did not dare to be as passionate as he was in China. He followed closely behind Sister Kiki, and did not dare to fall behind by half a meter. Here, Xianxian couldn't even speak or understand English. He was afraid that he would get lost and never be able to find his way back. On the other hand, Kiki was like a fish in water. She was very familiar with the English environment. When she was young, she spent some time in the United States, Canada, France, England, and even Sweden. Although Kiki could speak French, English was a universal language after all. In the past, she had only heard that she was familiar with English, but as the little girl slowly grew up, she watched English cartoons by herself, chatted with Little Seven and other good friends over the internet, in kindergarten, and even in her father's school, honed her English level. In terms of vocabulary, Kiki could be said to be comparable to a student who had passed the CET for exam. After all, she did not study it systematically. However, in terms of daily English usage, Kiki was definitely not worse than a child of the same age whose mother tongue was English. Sweet_shop. Before Kiki could answer Dejun's question, she suddenly saw something that made her shout excitedly, "Brother Dejun, Xian, that's the candy shop. Let's go to the candy shop, okay?" "Okay, my dad said that I'll listen to you today." Dejun nodded. Xian followed closely and expressed his intention with his actions. Regardless of whether he understood or not, when he heard the word candy, Xian's spirit was lifted. When they walked into the candy shop, it was different from the old grandpas and store managers in the United States. There were some young girls working here, but they were very happy to receive the little guys. Kiki remembered her dad's instruction to help Dejun and the others translate. After listening to the shop assistant, Kiki turned to Dejun and Xian and said, "They asked us what candy we want." Well, the translation was quite good, but Dejun and Xian both had their mouths wide open and didn't know what to say. The candy shop was filled with a sweet smell, as if they were soaked in honey. The shop was almost surrounded by cupboards, and each cupboard was filled with all kinds of candies. There were almost no duplicates. This couldn't be seen in China. Foreign candy shops specialized in selling candies. The most attractive thing about them was that they had a variety of candies. They were creative and colorful. Almost no children could taste all the candies, so they were especially popular among children under the age of 12. The children in China weren't so lucky. Except for the major cities, there were very few candy shops. Even if there were, they weren't opened for children. If the children wanted to eat candy, the parents would generally only buy it in the supermarket. Hard candies, soft candies, fruit candies, lollipops, there was no creativity at all. Even for Kiki, she missed the experience of going to the candy shop with Alan's wife and children when she was in the United States with her dad. When she returned to China, she only had such a surprise on her birthday. Alan sent Kiki's favorite candy gift across the sea. So when Kiki asked Dejun and Xian to say it, how could they say it? After staring at each other for a while, Kiki had no choice but to turn around and continue to communicate with the beautiful shop assistant in the shop. "Do you have any recommendations?" "How about this candy?" The shop assistant took out a large glass candy jar. "I_like_faith." Kiki nodded happily. She turned around and introduced it to Xian and the others. "This is a very delicious candy. It looks like an old man's cane. It's even better than lollipops. There are many flavors." Xian was drooling. He nodded vigorously, And Dejun also pushed Kiki and said, "Kiki, buy it. I think it's delicious." "Then we want 5. Kiki turned around and said to the shop assistant, "I want every flavor. I like the orange candy cane the best." Kiki also bought some fruit-flavored gummies, but these gummies were different from the ones in China. There were rectangles, spheres, and ovals. There were also many flavors, such as apple mixed with blackberry, apple mixed with custard. Kiki asked the shop assistant to get a little of each flavor, so that everyone could have their favorite candy. There were also chocolate truffle candies, a little like Farrelly but more expensive, chocolate ice cream sandwich candies and cream pudding candies. "How much is it?" Kiki asked. Xian and Dejun, who were behind them, were looking forward to it. As Kiki had been explaining to them, the 2 boys kept swallowing their saliva. They wanted to buy it immediately and eat it. 36 pieces. The shop assistant even made a hand gesture. Needless to say, the candies here weren't expensive. Chi-Chi bought a big bag, and it was only 150 renminbi. "We can still buy some more." Kiki wanted to pay, but she suddenly hesitated. She seemed to have remembered that she had only eaten a candy once when she was young. She swallowed her saliva and explained to the shop assistant, "We have 100 yuan, and we still need to buy some biscuits and ask Brother Kong Kong for help. So we can buy some more." Kiki planned to buy 40 pieces. Chapter 1465. There was a saying in the encyclopedia, when a character shows different characteristics from the original image, or multiple contradictory characteristics exist at the same time. This is called contrast cuteness. At this moment, the little girl in the camera was really cute. My daughter, who had black hair and black eyes, was doing the accounts with the beautiful shop assistant with brown curly hair, like an old accountant. The contrast caused a strong visual conflict. Kiki's mind was very clear. She had already spent more than 30 yuan, which was just enough to make up for 40 yuan of candy and 20 yuan of biscuits. Candy was much better than biscuits. This was the point that the 3 little guys agreed on. Then, with 40 yuan left, they could go to the supermarket and meet up with Kong Kong and the others. They could also buy other things that they liked. Finally, the little girl wanted to buy a candy that was hidden deep in her memory, but she had only eaten it once. "Excuse me, do you have that kind of candy? It's a little hard on the outside." "No, it's crunchy." Kiki tried hard to recall. She raised her head and explained, "Then the inside is like cotton candy. It's very delicious, sour and sweet." "I know," the shop assistant said with a smile. "You mean flying auctioneers?" Kiki was still a little confused when it came to names, especially when she didn't know some of the words. Although the little girl was very talented, she was not so talented that she could learn it without a teacher. Fortunately, the shop assistant found a large candy jar in a corner and opened it, taking out one for Kiki to taste. Immediately, the little girl's eyes lit up. She jumped excitedly, nodded and said, "This is it, this is it. I like to eat this. I like it very much." They bought another bag of candy, and then Kiki asked for some jumping candy and magic candy that could dye the tongue. These were not put in the previous big bag, but in an additional small bag, so that they could reach out and eat directly. Although she was only a 4-year-old child, Kiki had learned a lot of tricks from her mother to make life more comfortable. "We can't eat too fast. We have to leave some for Kong Kong," Kiki said to Xian and the others as she ate until her tongue was purple. The bag was now held by Dejun, but there were a few jumping candies in Dejun's mouth. He pursed his lips and squinted his small eyes, enjoying it very much, but he couldn't say anything. Xian was the same, he only cared about eating. However, it was okay if no one said anything, because there were candies to eat. What else was there to say? After buying the biscuits, Kiki took Dejun and Xian to find Kong Kong and the others. She carried the bag of sweets, which was the heaviest. The bag of biscuits was carried by Dejun, while the youngest Xian carried the bag of sweets. He was so happy that his hair was about to explode. Kong Kong and Xian and the others were at the cashier's counter. Xian and Kiki. "Brother Kong Kong, Brother Nuyi." Kiki jogged happily and asked, "Have you completed your mission?" "Not yet, we still have to pay. Kong Kong saw that the other party was scanning the barcodes and waved her hand. Then we'll wait for you. Chi-Chi nodded and hung the heavy bag on the shopping cart. Then, she stood on her tiptoes and pressed down on the shopping cart to look inside. The items in the shopping cart had already been scanned with barcodes. She wanted to know what Nuyi and the others had bought. Ah! Nuyi shouted happily. He also tiptoed and took out a small tray wrapped in plastic from the cart. Look, this is a strawberry, a huge strawberry. Kiki clapped her hands and said happily, That's great! I love strawberries, you guys bought a lot of good stuff. Brother Kong Kong, have some candies. Xian Xian walked over slowly. This time, he didn't have the intention to eat alone. Instead, he eagerly handed the bag over. Yummy yummy. The little guys ate as if no one was around. Kong Kong looked at Kiki and Dejun's bags and asked, What did you guys buy? I have biscuits, she has candies, Dejun said. Finally, the cashier scanned the items in the cart. She gestured and said, A total of $180. $180? Kiki asked in surprise. The little girl knew that the two teams only had $100. Kong Kong didn't understand numbers, but he could see from the computer. He shook his head and said, Nuyi, we don't have that much money. Then what should we do? Nuyi asked awkwardly. When it came to carrying out missions, Nuyi still lacked the ability to think independently. When there were others around, he wanted others to think of ideas for him. Dependence needed growth to get rid of. At the side, Chi-Chi opened her small bag to take a look. There were only 40 yuan inside. 100 plus 40 was 140 yuan. There was still a huge gap to 180 yuan. We need to refund some of the things we don't want, Kong Kong said. As he spoke, he picked from the cart. I don't want this eggplant. It's so big, it's enough to buy one. However, he spoke in Mandarin, and it was a long speech, which made the cashier sister stunned. Kiki was also confused for a while. She patted her head and translated for Kong Kong. Sister, we don't have enough money. Can you refund these for us? The little girl didn't learn to translate. Her translation didn't have any principles of fidelity to the original text, nor did it have any standards of sincerity. It was purely based on the meaning, and she spoke in her own words. However, Kiki still helped a lot. Kong Kong's words that he didn't understand were explained by Kiki. The cashier sister started to take the items that Kong Kong put on the counter to cancel the order. But Brother Kong, we want to buy all of these. Nuyi finally understood. He said reluctantly, we want to eat chicken for lunch. Drumsticks are enough. Kong Kong calmly bypassed Nuoyi's obstruction and placed the perfectly packaged chicken back on the table. She spoke without allowing anyone to object. He glanced at the screen. There were still $107 left. Kong Kong looked at it and picked up the bag of strawberries that wasn't included in the ingredients. Brother Kong, this won't do, Nuyi said anxiously. Brother Kong Kong, don't refund this, okay? I like strawberries. Kiki was also anxious. She waved at the cashier and said, No, $107, we only have $100. Kong Kong said awkwardly as he held his own banknote. I still have some. Kiki took out some money from her bag and said, I'll lend it to you. The strawberries were saved. A happy ending for everyone. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.